Don't pretend you understand this. Dr. Celeste Rourke's voice sliced through the lecture hall like a scalpel, silencing 30 graduate students mid-whisper. She stood before a blackboard covered in elegant mathematical notation, her reputation as Whitmore University's brightest star mathematician gleaming as brightly as the chalk dust on her designer blazer. But tonight, the person she was addressing wasn't a student. Security had their hands on the shoulders of Malik Brooks, the night shift janitor, 1 second away from dragging him out for the crime of looking too long at her proof. Malik didn't flinch. He studied the board, then spoke just loud enough to be heard. Line 3. The transformation's inverted. The room went from snickering to dead silent, because he was right, precise, undeniable. And in that moment, the floor moved beneath everyone's feet. If you want to see how far genius can travel when wrapped in a janitor's uniform, stay with me until the very end. Like this story and drop a comment about which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this journey reaches. The first time Malik Brooks truly saw Whitmore University's Department of Mathematics, he was on his knees scrubbing coffee stains from marble floors that cost more than his mother's annual medical bills. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of autumn night where New England cold seeps through brick walls and settles in your bones. The lecture hall, Beaumont 310 they called it, named after some dead benefactor whose oil money still paid for the mahogany paneling, was supposed to be empty. Malik had checked the schedule twice. Tuesday nights belonged to him. Vacuum the aisles, empty the trash, wipe down the desks where tomorrow's future economists and engineers would pretend to pay attention. But tonight, the lights were blazing. Malik paused at the door, his cleaning cart's wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. Through the small window, he could see them. Graduate students clustered in tight groups, notebooks open, expressions ranging from confused to desperate. And at the front of the room, commanding the space like a conductor before an orchestra, stood Dr. Celeste Rourke. She was younger than most tenured professors. 34, Malik had heard through the campus gossip network that connected custodians, cafeteria workers, and groundskeepers in ways the faculty never suspected. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that probably had a French name, and she wore the kind of casual elegance that came from never worrying about price tags. A cashmere sweater in deep burgundy, tailored pants, boots that clicked against the floor with authority. But it was her presence that filled the room. The beauty of differential topology, Celeste said, her voice carrying the particular music of someone who knew she was brilliant and expected everyone else to know it too, is that it forces you to think beyond the obvious. Anyone can memorize formulas. True mathematicians see the structure beneath. She turned to the blackboard, a massive slate that stretched 12 feet across, and began writing with chalk that left perfect, confident strokes. Equations bloomed across the dark surface like exotic flowers, each symbol connecting to the next in a dance that Malik recognized instantly. He shouldn't have stopped. He had 3 more buildings to clean before his shift ended at 6 a.m., and Mrs. Patterson in facilities had already written him up twice for falling behind schedule. But his feet wouldn't move, because she was working through a proof he'd seen before, years ago, in a different life. The key transformation happens here, Celeste continued, tapping the board at a cluster of symbols near the center. When we apply the diffeomorphism to the manifold, the local structure preserves. That's wrong. The words left Malik's mouth before his brain could stop them. The room froze. 30 graduate students turned as one, their faces registering confusion, then recognition, then something uglier. The janitor had spoken. The man in the gray uniform with Whitmore Facilities embroidered over the breast pocket. The one who was supposed to be invisible. Celeste's expression shifted through several phases in quick succession: surprise, annoyance, disbelief. She set down her chalk with deliberate care. "Excuse me?" Malik's heart hammered against his ribs. Every survival instinct he'd developed over the past 4 years screamed at him to apologize, back away, disappear into the safety of his cart and his mop and his carefully maintained invisibility. But the math wouldn't let him. "Line 3, he said quietly, nodding toward the board. "The transformation. You inverted it." A sound rippled through the students, not quite laughter, but close. Someone in the back row whispered something that included the words "doesn't even" and "high school." Celeste's smile was thin and sharp. I'm sorry, Mr. Brooks. Malik Brooks. Mr. Brooks. She said his name like she was examining it for defects. While I appreciate your enthusiasm for mathematics, this is a graduate-level topology seminar. The proof I'm presenting is from my own research, published in the Journal of Differential Geometry last spring. I can assure you there are no errors. She turned back to the board, dismissing him with the elegant pivot of her shoulders. But Malik was already moving forward, his feet carrying him down the center aisle before he could think better of it. The cleaning cart stayed behind, forgotten. Students shifted in their seats, some leaning forward with the kind of interest usually reserved for car accidents. Dr. Rourke, Malik said, his voice steadier now. May I? He gestured toward the board. Celeste's eyes narrowed. For a long moment, she said nothing, and Malik could see the calculation happening behind her perfect composure. She could refuse, of course, have him removed. But that would look defensive in front of her students. And from what he'd observed during months of cleaning this building, Celeste Rourke never allowed herself to appear anything less than supremely confident. By all means, she said, stepping aside with a sweep of her hand that managed to be both gracious and condescending. Enlighten us. Malik picked up a piece of chalk. It felt familiar in his fingers, a muscle memory from another lifetime. He moved to the section she'd just completed, his eyes tracing the logical flow of the argument. The setup is beautiful, he said, meaning it. The way you framed the initial conditions, the choice of coordinate system, it's elegant work. But here, he circled the cluster of symbols in line 3. When you apply the inverse transformation to push the structure forward, you've got the orientation backwards. It should be phi inverse composed with psi, not the other way around. The way you've written it, the local homeomorphism doesn't preserve the smooth structure. He stepped back. The room was absolutely silent. Celeste moved forward slowly, her eyes fixed on the board. Malik watched her face as she traced through the logic, saw the exact moment when understanding and realization hit. A tiny muscle near her jaw tightened. That's... She stopped, started again. The conclusion still holds. The orientation doesn't affect the final result. It does, though, Malik said gently. If you carry the inverted transformation through to line 7, you end up with a contradiction in the boundary conditions. The proof works, but only if you fix line 3 first. One of the graduate students, a young woman with bright red glasses, pulled out her phone and started frantically typing. Others were already checking their own notes, working through the logic. The whispers started small and grew louder. He's right, someone said. Look at the boundary case. How did we not catch that? Professor Rourke, is this going to be on the... That's enough. Celeste's voice cut through the rising noise like a guillotine blade. She set down the chalk with enough force that it cracked against the metal tray. Mr. Brooks, I think you have floors to clean, and the rest of you have problem sets due Friday. She didn't look at Malik as she said it. He understood dismissal when he heard it. Without another word, he walked back up the aisle, the silence following him like a physical weight. His hands were shaking slightly as he gripped the handle of his cleaning cart. The wheels squeaked again, louder now, or maybe he was just hearing it differently. He was almost to the door when Celeste spoke again. Mr. Brooks? He stopped but didn't turn around. Where did you study mathematics? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications. Malik could feel 30 pairs of eyes on his back, could imagine the theories already forming in their minds. Community college, maybe. Online courses. Some kind of savant situation, the kind that made for feel-good news stories but didn't actually mean anything in the real world of academic credentials and institutional gatekeeping. I didn't, he lied. Then he pushed through the door and let it close behind him with a soft, final click. The rumors started before Malik's shift ended. By the time he clocked out at 6:04 a.m., 4 minutes late, which would probably earn him another write-up, the story had already metastasized across campus social media. Someone had filmed the whole thing, of course. A shaky phone video that caught him at the blackboard, Celeste's face when she realized he was right, the stunned silence of 30 graduate students watching their professor get corrected by the janitor. The video had been posted to 3 different platforms with variations on the same caption. Custodian owns math professor at Whitmore. By noon, it had 50,000 views. By 6 p.m., 200,000. Malik learned about it from his mother. He'd stopped by her apartment in Riverside, the subsidized housing complex 30 minutes from campus where she'd lived since the medical bills had eaten their old house, to bring her groceries and help with her medications. She was sitting in her wheelchair by the window, her tablet balanced on her lap, when he came through the door. "Baby, you're famous," she said, her voice carrying that particular rasp that the lung disease had given her. Malik's stomach dropped. "Mama, what?" She turned the tablet to show him. There he was, frozen mid-gesture at the blackboard, chalk in hand, looking more alive than he'd felt in 4 years. The comment section was a war zone. This is what happens when you assume credentials equal intelligence. That prof got demolished, LMAO. Okay, but how does a janitor know differential topology? Maybe he's not just a janitor? Maybe there's a story here? Or maybe it's staged for clout. Universities do this stuff for PR. Malik's hands tightened on the grocery bags. "It's not a big deal, Mama." "Not a big deal?" She laughed, which turned into a cough that made him wince. When she recovered, her eyes were bright. "Malik, people are talking about you. Really talking. I saw 3 articles already. Unknown genius, hidden brilliance, baby. This could be your chance." "My chance for what?" He moved to the kitchen, started unpacking groceries with more force than necessary. Bread, eggs, the protein shakes her doctor recommended. To go viral? To become some feel-good story people share for a week before forgetting? I have a job, Mama. A job with health insurance that covers your treatments. The silence that followed was heavier than her wheelchair. "I'm not saying quit tomorrow," she said finally, softly. "I'm just saying, don't hide what you are. You're not just a janitor, baby. You never were." Malik closed his eyes and gripped the edge of the counter. "I'm whatever pays the bills." He tried to keep his head down. He really did. For 3 days, Malik stuck to his routine. Clock in at 11 p.m., clean his assigned buildings, avoid Beaumont Hall entirely, clock out at 6 a.m., go home, sleep until 2 p.m., visit his mother, repeat. He deleted his social media apps, ignored the emails that started appearing in his inbox, journalists, bloggers, someone claiming to be from a podcast about overlooked genius. But Whitmore University was not a place where things stayed quiet. On Friday night, 1 week after the incident in Beaumont 310, Malik was cleaning the Applied Sciences building when he heard voices coming from the third-floor mathematics commons. He should have turned around, should have come back later. But something in the tone of the conversation pulled him forward. The commons was technically a lounge. Leather chairs, coffee maker, walls covered in whiteboards where students could work through problems collaboratively. Tonight, it was full of graduate students, and they were arguing about an integral. "It's a substitution problem," one of them was saying. A tall guy with a beard that screamed, "I think philosophy is mathematics." "You just need to find the right change of variables." "I tried substitution," another student shot back, gesturing at a whiteboard covered in failed attempts. "The bounds get messy, the function doesn't simplify. I think it's a trick question. Professor Rourke probably wants us to recognize it's not solvable in closed form." Malik stood in the doorway, mop in hand, and looked at the board. The integral was nasty, a rational function with trigonometric terms in both numerator and denominator, bounds from 0 to pi. The kind of problem that looked deliberately designed to waste hours of your life. He could see why the students thought it might be unsolvable, but it wasn't. "Try Weierstrass substitution," he said. 7 heads swiveled toward him. The bearded student blinked. "What?" Malik stepped into the room, set down his mop. Weierstrass substitution. Let u equal tangent of theta over 2. It converts all the trig functions into rational expressions, and the bounds become 0 to infinity. Then you can use partial fractions. He moved to the board, picked up a marker, and started writing. The transformation fell into place like puzzle pieces. The tangent substitution, the algebraic simplification, the partial fraction decomposition that made the integral suddenly, beautifully solvable. 3 minutes later, he had the answer. The student stared. The girl who'd been arguing stopped. That's actually really elegant. How did you— You're him, someone else interrupted. The guy from the video, the one who corrected Professor Rourke. Malik capped the marker. I just showed you a different approach to the problem, that's all. No, the bearded student said slowly, looking between Malik and the board like he was trying to solve a different kind of equation. That's not all. You just solved in 3 minutes what we've been working on for 2 hours, and you did it using a technique we haven't even covered yet. It's in your textbook, Chapter 14. Nobody reads Chapter 14. It's the extra topics section. Malik shrugged. Maybe you should. He picked up his mop and walked out, leaving them staring at the board. By Monday morning, there was a crowd waiting outside Beaumont Hall. Not a huge crowd, maybe 30 people, mostly students, but a few faculty members Malik recognized from various departments. They had phones out, cameras ready, the particular energy of people who smelled a story. Malik's supervisor, Mrs. Patterson, a woman whose entire personality could be summarized as disappointed sigh, pulled him aside before he could enter the building. Brooks, what the hell is going on? I don't know, ma'am. You don't know? She looked at the crowd, then back at him. You've been working here 4 years without causing a single problem, and now suddenly you're some kind of campus celebrity? I've got students asking me when you'll be in Beaumont. I've got reporters trying to get your schedule. She stopped, rubbed her temples. Just do your job. Stay out of sight. This'll blow over. But it didn't blow over. Because that same Monday, Dr. Celeste Rourke made a decision. The email went out to the entire Department of Mathematics at 3:47 p.m. Subject: Open problem session. This Friday. Dear colleagues and students, I'm pleased to announce a special session this Friday at 4 p.m. in Beaumont Auditorium. We'll be exploring challenging problems in analysis and topology, with open discussion encouraged. All are welcome. Bess, Dr. Celeste Rourke. On the surface, it was innocent. The department held open sessions several times a semester. Informal gatherings where faculty presented interesting problems and students could engage with complex mathematics in a relaxed setting. But everyone who read that email understood what it really was. It was a challenge. Malik heard about it from 3 different people before his shift even started: a cafeteria worker who'd gone back to school for engineering, a security guard who moonlighted as a tutor, a facilities coordinator who'd pulled him aside in the break room with concern in her eyes. She's setting a trap, honey, the coordinator said. That professor, she's going to try to make an example of you. I'm not going, Malik said simply. Good. Smart. Stay away from that mess. But Friday came anyway, inevitable as mathematics itself. And at 3:55 p.m., against every instinct for self-preservation he possessed, Malik found himself standing at the back of Beaumont Auditorium, watching it fill with people. The space was designed to hold 200. There were at least 300 crammed inside, with more spilling into the hallway. Students sat on the steps, stood against the walls, perched on the arms of seats. Malik saw phone cameras everywhere, little red recording lights like predatory eyes. At exactly 4 o'clock p.m., Celeste Rourke walked onto the stage. She'd dressed for the occasion, a sharp black suit that probably cost more than Malik's car, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup subtle but flawless. She looked like success personified, like every door in the world had opened for her and always would. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the auditorium without needing amplification. Thank you all for coming. Today I thought we'd explore some problems from my current research. Nothing too complex, just interesting challenges that require creative thinking. Her eyes swept the crowd and landed, briefly, unmistakably, on Malik. I believe mathematics is for everyone willing to do the work. Credentials matter, yes. They're how we signal seriousness, how we demonstrate commitment to the field. But raw insight? That can come from anywhere. The way she said anywhere made it sound like an insult. She turned to the massive screen behind her and an equation appeared. It was brutal, a partial differential equation with nonlinear terms, multiple boundary conditions, the kind of problem that would take a graduate student days to even approach. Let's start with something simple, Celeste said, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Who wants to take a shot at this? Silence. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the auditorium. "What about the janitor, Malik Brooks? Is he here?" The crowd shifted, heads turning, searching. Malik felt his face burn. Celeste's expression didn't change. "Mr. Brooks is certainly welcome to participate if he's present. This is, after all, an open session." 300 people were looking for him now. Malik could have stayed quiet, could have slipped out the back door, could have preserved his safety and invisibility. Instead, he raised his hand. "I'm here." The crowd parted like water as he walked down the center aisle. Every camera in the room tracked his movement. He could hear whispers, feel the weight of expectations and skepticism and curiosity pressing against him from all sides. When he reached the front, Celeste gestured toward the screen with exaggerated courtesy. "Please, Mr. Brooks, show us your insight." Malik studied the equation. It was nasty work, deliberately so. The kind of problem designed not to test understanding, but to prove you'd spent years in the academic trenches, learning the specific tools and techniques that opened these particular locks. But he had spent years in those trenches. Once, in what felt like another life. He picked up the marker and started writing. The solution came in stages, each step building on the last, transforming the equation into a more tractable form, identifying the key symmetries, applying a technique from spectral theory that most graduate students wouldn't see until their second year. His hand moved steadily across the whiteboard, filling it with mathematics that was both rigorous and elegant. When he finished and stepped back, the auditorium was silent. Then someone started clapping. It spread like wildfire, applause that built from scattered approval to a standing ovation that made the walls ring. Malik stood there, marker still in hand, overwhelmed by the sheer noise of recognition. Celeste's smile never wavered, but her eyes had gone cold. "Impressive," she said, her voice cutting through the applause. "Though I notice you used a somewhat unconventional approach. Most mathematicians would have tackled this using the standard separation of variables method." "Most mathematicians would have gotten stuck in the nonlinear terms," Malik replied quietly. "The spectral approach is cleaner." "Cleaner?" She repeated the word like she was tasting something bitter. "Tell me, Mr. Brooks, since you seem to have such strong opinions about mathematical style, what do you think of this?" A new equation appeared on the screen. This one was worse, much worse. Malik recognized it immediately. A problem from Celeste's doctoral dissertation, a piece of work that had earned her significant recognition in the field. It was the kind of problem that took months to solve properly, that required not just technical skill, but deep conceptual understanding built over years of study. It was also, unmistakably, a trap. "This," Celeste said, her voice now carrying an edge of satisfaction, "is from a paper I published 3 years ago. Took me 8 months to crack. If you can solve this, Mr. Brooks, right now in front of everyone, then I'll publicly acknowledge that credentials truly don't matter. In fact," she paused, and her smile turned sharp and dangerous. "If you can solve this, I'll marry you." The auditorium erupted, laughter, gasps, the sudden electric charge of spectacle. Someone shouted, "No way!" Someone else started filming more intently. This had stopped being about mathematics and become something else entirely. A performance, a public execution disguised as an intellectual challenge. Malik stared at the equation on the screen and felt something cold settle in his chest, because he knew this problem. He'd seen variations of it before, had studied the techniques required to solve it. But solving it here, now, under these conditions, it wouldn't just prove his mathematical ability. It would expose him completely. The question wasn't whether he could do it. The question was whether he was ready for what would happen when he did. Malik looked out at the crowd. 300 faces, 300 cameras, 300 witnesses to whatever came next. He saw students leaning forward with hunger in their eyes. He saw faculty members watching with professional skepticism. He saw Celeste standing with her arms crossed, confident in her trap. And in the back row, near the exit, he saw Mrs. Patterson from facilities. She met his eyes and gave the tiniest shake of her head. "Don't walk away." Malik turned back to the screen, picked up the marker, and began to write. The marker felt heavier than it should have in Malik's hand as he faced the screen, 300 pairs of eyes burning into his back like cigarette brands. The equation Celeste had thrown at him sprawled across the display in all its vicious complexity, a nonlinear partial differential system with coupled boundary conditions that looked like it had been designed specifically to humiliate anyone foolish enough to attempt it in public. He could walk away. Should walk away. Mrs. Patterson's warning glance still hung in his peripheral vision like a lifeline he was choosing to ignore. But the mathematics was already unfolding in his mind, pieces clicking into place with the particular satisfaction of a solution that wanted to be found. And beneath that, deeper, more dangerous, was something he hadn't felt in 4 years, the pure, reckless need to be seen for what he actually was. Malik started writing. The first transformation came smoothly, a change of variables that simplified the coupled terms. He worked methodically, his handwriting steady despite the tremor in his chest, each line of mathematics building on the last like stones in an arch. The auditorium had gone silent except for the scratch of marker on whiteboard and the soft rustle of people leaning forward in their seats. Celeste watched from the side of the stage, her arms still crossed, her expression unreadable. But Malik caught the moment, barely 5 minutes into his solution, when her posture shifted, just slightly. The kind of change you'd only notice if you were paying attention. She'd expected him to fail by now. He pushed forward, applying a technique from harmonic analysis that required recognizing a hidden symmetry in the boundary conditions. It was the kind of insight that separated competent mathematicians from exceptional ones, the ability to see structure where others saw only chaos. "Hold on," someone called out from the audience, a male voice, skeptical and sharp. "You can't just assume that symmetry exists. You need to prove the boundary conditions actually support it." Malik didn't turn around. "The proof is implicit in the transformation. Watch what happens when I apply the Fourier decomposition." He wrote 3 more lines, and the symmetry emerged naturally from the mathematics itself, undeniable and elegant. A murmur rippled through the crowd, half appreciation, half disbelief. 15 minutes in, Malik had reduced the problem to something almost beautiful. A single ordinary differential equation with known solution methods. He could feel the finish line approaching, could sense the inevitable moment when he'd complete the solution and everything would change. His hand hesitated. In that pause, Celeste spoke. "Interesting approach, Mr. Brooks. Though I notice you're using techniques from spectral theory that aren't typically taught until the graduate level." Her voice carried across the auditorium with practiced ease. "Where exactly did you encounter these methods?" It was a calculated question designed to expose him in front of everyone. Malik could give the same answer he'd given before. "I didn't study mathematics formally." And watched the solution on the board become tainted by the suspicion that he'd somehow cheated, somehow had access to resources he shouldn't have. Or he could tell the truth and shatter the careful invisibility he'd maintained for 4 years. He chose a third option. "Does it matter?" Malik turned to face her directly. "Either the mathematics is correct or it isn't. Everything else is just credentials and gatekeeping." Celeste's smile was thin and cold. "Credentials exist for a reason, Mr. Brooks. They're how we distinguish between rigorous training and recreational enthusiasm." "Recreational." Malik repeated the word, tasting the condescension in it. "Is that what you think this is?" "I think you're very clever. I think you've clearly studied mathematics beyond what one might expect from someone in your position. But solving one problem, even solving it brilliantly, doesn't make you a mathematician." She gestured at the students filling the auditorium. "These people have dedicated years to formal study. They've passed qualifying exams, completed coursework, written dissertations. They've earned the right to be taken seriously in this field. And I haven't. Have you?" The challenge hung in the air between them like a blade. Malik could feel the crowd's attention shifting, the narrative changing from janitor proves genius to imposter, exposed by real academic. Phone cameras adjusted their angles, catching both of them in frame. Malik turned back to the whiteboard and finished the solution. The final steps came quickly. The general solution to the reduced equation, the application of boundary conditions to determine the specific case, the back transformation to express everything in the original variables. When he set down the marker, the complete solution filled 3 large whiteboards in a continuous flow of logic that started with Celeste's brutal equation and ended with an explicit, verifiable answer. The auditorium erupted. Not just applause this time, but something wilder, Students standing on chairs, faculty members checking their phones frantically to verify the work, the kind of chaos that happens when the impossible becomes real in front of your eyes. Malik heard someone shout, "He actually did it!" and someone else yelling, "Check line 14, there's no way!" And through it all, the steady rhythm of cameras capturing every moment. Celeste stood frozen at the edge of the stage, her face a careful mask that couldn't quite hide the shock bleeding through at the edges. Then she started clapping, slow, deliberate, each clap carrying more weight than applause should. The crowd quieted gradually, attention shifting back to her. "Remarkable," Celeste said, her voice projecting over the dying noise. "Truly remarkable, Mr. Brooks. You've managed to solve in, 23 minutes? A problem that took me months of dedicated research." She walked toward him, her heels clicking against the stage floor with metronomic precision. Which raises some very interesting questions. Malik's stomach tightened. Such as? Such as how a custodial worker with no formal training in advanced mathematics managed to execute techniques from spectral theory, harmonic analysis, and functional analysis with the fluency of someone who's spent years immersed in these fields. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough that her voice dropped to something almost intimate. Such as why you're mopping floors instead of publishing papers. Such as who you really are, Mr. Brooks. The auditorium had gone silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now, predatory, hungry for revelation. "I'm exactly who I appear to be," Malik said quietly. "Are you?" Celeste tilted her head, studying him like he was an equation she couldn't quite solve. "Because from where I'm standing, you're either a genuine mathematical prodigy who's been hiding in plain sight for years, in which case, why? Or you're something else entirely. Someone with training you're not admitting to. Someone with access to resources and knowledge that don't match the story everyone's so eager to believe. You think I cheated?" "I think," Celeste said carefully, "that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and you, Mr. Brooks, are making some very extraordinary claims right now, whether you realize it or not." A hand shot up in the audience. A young woman in the 3rd row with bright pink hair and enough piercings to set off a metal detector. "Dr. Rourke, with respect, we all just watched him solve it. Live, in front of 300 witnesses. What more evidence do you need?" "Context," Celeste replied smoothly. "Background. Verification that this isn't some elaborate performance piece or viral marketing stunt." She turned back to Malik. "I'm not trying to be cruel, Mr. Brooks. I'm trying to be thorough. Surely you can understand that." Malik understood perfectly. He understood that Celeste Rourke had just been publicly outmaneuvered by a janitor and was now scrambling to reclaim control of the narrative. He understood that every word out of her mouth was designed to plant seeds of doubt, to transform his success into something suspicious and questionable. He understood, most of all, that she was absolutely terrified of what he represented. "I'll make you a deal," Malik said, his voice carrying farther than he intended. "You want verification? Give me another problem. Right now, something you've never published, never presented publicly, something only you know the answer to. I'll solve it, and you can check my work line by line to make sure I'm not pulling some trick." The crowd stirred, excited murmurs building like static electricity before a storm. Celeste's expression shifted through several calculations before settling on something that might have been respect if it weren't wrapped in so much steel. "You're very confident. I'm very tired of being questioned." "Then you're going to have a difficult career in mathematics, Mr. Brooks. This field is built on questioning everything." She pulled out her phone, typed something quickly, then set it aside. "Fine. One more problem. But not here. Not like this." "Where, then?" "The Euler Challenge." The words landed like a bomb in the middle of the auditorium. Malik heard the collective intake of breath, saw students turning to each other with wide eyes, felt the sudden spike in tension that came from a game changing completely. The Euler Challenge was legendary at Whitmore, an annual mathematics competition that drew participants from universities across the region. It was run by the Department of Mathematics, but it was open to anyone: undergrads, graduate students, visiting researchers, even the occasional brave high school prodigy. The problems were brutal, the format was ruthless, and winning it was the kind of achievement that could launch an entire academic career. It was also, Malik knew with sudden certainty, going to be run by Celeste Rourke this year. The competition is in 3 weeks, Celeste continued, her voice taking on the formal quality of someone making an official announcement. I'm serving as this year's primary judge, along with 2 visiting faculty from MIT and Stanford. Mr. Brooks, I'm formally inviting you to compete. Prove yourself there, under controlled conditions with neutral judges, and I'll be the first to acknowledge your abilities publicly. Refuse, and, well, she smiled. People will draw their own conclusions. It was a trap disguised as an opportunity, and everyone in the room knew it. Celeste would design the competition, control the format, set the standards. She'd have 3 weeks to prepare problems specifically calibrated to expose whatever weakness she believed Malik possessed. And if he won anyway, she could claim the victory was expected given his mysterious background. If he lost, she'd have proven her point about credentials and formal training. Malik should have said no, should have recognized the setup for what it was, and walked away with his dignity intact. Instead, he heard himself say, I accept. The auditorium exploded into chaos. The video of Malik accepting Celeste's challenge went viral within hours, spawning a dozen think pieces by midnight and launching a full-scale media frenzy by morning. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion about the janitor mathematician. He was a fraud, he was a genius, he was proof that the education system was broken, he was an outlier that proved nothing, he was going to revolutionize how we thought about intelligence and opportunity. He was going to be exposed as a charlatan in 3 weeks. Malik tried to ignore it all. He went to work that night, his regular shift, cleaning the buildings he always cleaned, and found reporters waiting outside Beaumont Hall. Mr. Brooks, can you tell us about your background? Malik, what's your strategy for the Euler challenge? How does it feel to challenge the establishment? Are you self-taught, or is there formal training you're not disclosing? He pushed through them without comment, but they followed him inside until security finally forced them to leave. Even then, students kept stopping him in hallways, asking for autographs or advice, or just wanting to tell him they were rooting for him. One freshman burst into tears and said he was proof that dreams could come true. It was exhausting. Mrs. Patterson called him into her office at 2 a.m. Brooks, sit down. She gestured at the chair across from her desk, with the weariness of someone who'd been dealing with administrative headaches all day. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Are you going to keep working here after this competition thing? Malik blinked. Yes, of course. Why would... Because you're becoming a liability, she said bluntly. Not because of your work. Your work is fine. But I've got reporters calling, students disrupting your shifts, faculty members asking questions about our background check procedures. The university is getting nervous about the attention, and when the university gets nervous, people like me get told to handle it. I'm just trying to do my job. I know that. I believe that. But here's the reality, Brooks. You've got 3 weeks before this competition. After that, win or lose, things are going to change for you. So I'm asking again, are you planning to keep mopping floors, or are you planning to become something else? The question hung in the small office like smoke. Malik looked at Mrs. Patterson, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in 4 years. She had gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, lines around her eyes from decades of night shifts, hands that showed the wear of hard work. She'd been cleaning buildings at Whitmore since before Malik was born, and she'd probably be cleaning them long after he was gone. I need the insurance, he said finally. My mother, I know about your mother, I know about the medical bills. I know why you took this job in the first place. Mrs. Patterson leaned back in her chair with a sigh. I'm not trying to push you out, Brooks. I'm trying to prepare you, because in 3 weeks, you're either going to win this thing and become someone the university can't ignore, or you're going to lose and become someone they want to forget. Either way, this job, this quiet, invisible life you've built, it's over. Malik's hands tightened on the arms of the chair. What if I don't compete? What if I just withdraw? Can you? The answer was no, and they both knew it. Malik had stood on that stage in front of 300 people and accepted Celeste Rourke's challenge. He'd been filmed, shared, debated. Withdrawing now would be its own kind of verdict. Proof that he'd been a fraud all along, that Celeste had been right to question him. 3 weeks, Mrs. Patterson said quietly. Make them count. Malik spent the next 5 days trying to live normally, while the world lost its mind around him. He worked his shifts, visited his mother, who was now getting recognized at the grocery store by strangers who wanted to tell her how proud they were of her son, and tried very hard not to think about the Euler challenge. But the mathematics wouldn't leave him alone. He'd see an equation in a textbook someone left open on a library desk, and his mind would automatically start working through solutions. He'd hear students discussing a problem in the cafeteria and have to physically stop himself from interrupting with a better approach. At night, alone in his small apartment, he'd pull out old notebooks from his MIT days, the ones he'd kept hidden in a box under his bed for 4 years, and review material he'd once known as well as his own heartbeat. It felt like waking up from a long, dreamless sleep. On the 6th day, a package arrived at his apartment with no return address. Inside was a book, Advanced Topics in Differential Geometry, published 3 years ago. A note was tucked inside the front cover, written in elegant script on expensive paper. Mr. Brooks, I thought you might find this useful for your preparation. Chapter 7 covers some techniques that often appear in competitive settings. Best of luck. C.R. Malik stared at the note for a long time, trying to decode what it meant. Was it a genuine gesture of goodwill, a psychological tactic to make him second-guess his preparation, a subtle message that Celeste knew exactly what kind of problems she'd be setting? He opened the book and started reading Chapter 7. 3 hours later, his phone rang. Unknown number. Malik almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up on the 4th ring. Malik Brooks? The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. Who's asking? My name is Dr. Nadia Reyes. I'm a professor of mathematics at MIT, and I'm going to be serving as one of the guest judges for the Euler Challenge. A pause. I was hoping we could talk. Malik's grip tightened on the phone. About what? About you. About your background. About why someone with your clear abilities is working as a custodian instead of pursuing mathematics professionally. Another pause, longer this time. About what happened at MIT 7 years ago. The air left Malik's lungs in a rush. He sat down heavily on his couch, the book from Celeste sliding off his lap onto the floor. How do you... I make it my business to know the participants in competitions I'm judging, and you, Mr. Brooks, have left some very interesting footprints in the academic record, footprints that stop abruptly in 2018. Dr. Reyes' voice softened slightly. I'm not calling to expose you, Malik. I'm calling because I think you deserve a fair shot at this competition, and I want you to know that at least one of the judges will be evaluating you on your mathematics alone, not on whatever story Celeste Rourke is trying to tell about credentials and proper channels. Malik's throat was tight. Why would you do that? Because I was a lot like you once. First-generation college student, worked 3 jobs to pay for undergrad, almost gave up a dozen times because the system wasn't designed for people like us. I made it through, eventually, but I remember what it felt like to be constantly questioned, constantly asked to prove I belonged. A soft exhale. Celeste Rourke is a brilliant mathematician, but she was born with every advantage academia could offer. She doesn't understand what it costs to fight your way into this field when no one's holding the door open for you. She thinks I'm a fraud. She thinks you're a threat. There's a difference. Dr. Reyes' tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. The competition will have 3 rounds over 1 day, preliminary problems in the morning, intermediate work in the afternoon, and a final challenge in the evening. I can't tell you what the problems will be, that would be unethical, but I can tell you that they'll be designed to test not just technical skill, but creative problem-solving under pressure. Celeste will try to create conditions that favor students with traditional academic training. You'll need to be ready for that. How do I prepare for something designed to make me fail? You remember who you are, Dr. Reyes said simply. You remember that you already proved yourself when you solved her doctoral problem in 23 minutes. You remember that the mathematics doesn't care about credentials, it only cares about truth. And you trust that at least one judge will be watching for that truth instead of looking for reasons to dismiss you. After they hung up, Malik sat in his apartment for a long time, holding the phone and staring at the book on the floor. The note from Celeste peeked out from between the pages like a white flag or a declaration of war. He couldn't tell which. His mother called an hour later. Baby, have you eaten today? Mama, I'm fine. That's not what I asked. Have you eaten? Malik looked at his kitchen, at the protein shakes and instant noodles that constituted his current meal plan. Not really. I'm sending Mrs. Chen from downstairs over with food. Don't argue. A pause, and then softer. How are you really doing, Malik? He wanted to lie. Wanted to tell her everything was fine, that he was handling the pressure, that the competition was just 3 weeks away, and then life would go back to normal. But his mother had raised him alone after his father died, had worked 2 jobs while getting her nursing degree, had taught him that survival sometimes meant telling hard truths even when they hurt. I'm scared, he admitted quietly. Not of the competition, of what comes after. Dr. Reyes said something about footprints in the academic record, about 2018. She knows, Mama. She knows I was at MIT. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Malik thought the connection had dropped. Then, does Celeste Rourke know? I don't think so, not yet. Will it matter if she finds out? That was the question, wasn't it? Malik had dropped out of MIT's PhD program in his 3rd year, not because he couldn't do the work, but because his mother's diagnosis had come like a thunderbolt, and suddenly choosing between mathematics and family had been no choice at all. He'd left with half a dissertation written and a reputation as one of the brightest students in his cohort. He'd also left with incomplete paperwork, no formal degree, and gaps in his CV that would raise questions for any serious academic review. If Celeste found out, she could spin it a dozen different ways. He'd washed out, couldn't handle the pressure, wasn't as brilliant as everyone thought. Or worse, she could use it to question why he'd been hiding his background in the first place, implying there was something shameful or dishonest about his time at MIT. It'll matter, Malik said. But I don't know how yet. Then you control the story before she does. You tell people the truth, that you left to take care of me, that you did what family does. There's no shame in that, baby. Not to people who understand what matters. The academic world doesn't always understand what matters. His mother laughed, though it turned into a cough halfway through. Then maybe the academic world needs to be reminded. The next morning, Malik did something he hadn't done in 4 years. He walked into the main library and checked out every advanced mathematics textbook he could carry. 12 books, stacked so high he could barely see over them. The student at the circulation desk, a sophomore who'd been in the audience during his duel with Celeste, looked at him with something approaching reverence. Are you, studying for the Euler challenge? Something like that. That's so cool. Everyone's talking about how you're going to destroy it. The student leaned forward conspiratorially. Between you and me? Dr. Rourke's been in here every day pulling old competition problems and research papers. She's obsessed with making sure the challenge is rigorous enough, which everyone knows means she's designing it specifically to mess with you. Malik adjusted his grip on the books. Thanks for the heads up. He found an empty study room on the 4th floor, one of the small glass-walled cubicles that graduate students usually fought over, and spread his materials across the desk like he was preparing for war, which, in a sense, he was. For 3 hours, Malik worked through problems from past Euler challenges, refamiliarizing himself with the style and difficulty level. Most were hard but fair, the kind of challenges that rewarded both technical skill and creative insight. But every so often, he'd encounter a problem that felt different, nastier, more baroque, designed less to test understanding than to punish anyone who didn't know the exact right trick. Those, he suspected, were Celeste's contributions. He was working through a particularly vicious integral when someone knocked on the glass door. Malik looked up to find a man in his 60s standing in the hallway, wearing a tweed jacket that had gone out of style sometime during the Carter administration, and a smile that suggested he found the universe perpetually amusing. Mr. Brooks, may I come in? Malik gestured at the empty chair across from him. The man entered, closed the door carefully, and settled into the seat with the air of someone who had all the time in the world. Professor David Chen, he introduced himself, extending a hand. I teach in the philosophy department, but I have a hobbyist's interest in mathematics. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. Not at all. Malik shook his hand, wary. What can I do for you, Professor? Actually, I was hoping to do something for you. Chen pulled a worn notebook from his jacket pocket and set it on the desk between them. I've been attending Euler challenges for 15 years, not as a participant, mind you, but as an observer. I find them fascinating studies in human problem solving under pressure. And over those 15 years, I've noticed some patterns in how the competition is designed and judged. He opened the notebook, revealing pages filled with neat handwriting and diagrams. The judges tend to favor certain types of solutions: elegant, concise, using recognized techniques from the literature. They're less impressed by brute force methods or unconventional approaches, even when those approaches are mathematically valid. Understanding these preferences, understanding what the judges want to see, can be as important as solving the problems themselves. Malik studied the notebook, seeing years of careful observation distilled into practical advice. Why are you showing me this? Because I believe in fairness, Mr. Brooks. And I think you're walking into a competition that's been specifically designed to be unfair to you. Chen's smile faded, replaced by something more serious. Doctor, Rourke is a formidable mathematician, but she's also someone who believes very strongly in the traditional hierarchies of academia. She sees you as a threat to that hierarchy, not because of who you are, but because of what you represent. The idea that brilliance might exist outside the approved channels. You think she'll rig the competition? I think she'll design it in ways that favor participants with traditional training, which isn't quite the same as rigging, but the effect can be similar. Chen tapped the notebook. This might help level the field, at least a little. Malik looked at the professor for a long moment, trying to understand his angle. What do you get out of this? The satisfaction of watching an interesting experiment play out fairly, and perhaps... Chen's smile returned, tinged with something mischievous. The chance to see someone shake up a system that's grown too comfortable with its own assumptions. He left the notebook and walked out, leaving Malik alone with 12 library books, 3 weeks of pressure, and a growing sense that the Euler challenge was becoming something far bigger than a simple mathematics competition. It was becoming a referendum on everything the academic world believed about who belonged and who didn't. And Malik, whether he wanted to be or not, was about to become its most visible test case. The final 2 weeks before the competition passed in a blur of preparation and pressure. Malik worked his custodial shifts, studied during every spare moment, and tried to ignore the fact that his face had somehow become a symbol for a dozen different causes he'd never signed up for. Education reformers cited him as proof that the system was broken. Meritocracy advocates held him up as evidence that talent always rises. Class warriors used him to attack elite universities. Elite universities used him to prove they valued diversity and unconventional paths. Everyone had an opinion about Malik Brooks except Malik Brooks himself. 3 days before the competition, he was cleaning the mathematics building when he heard voices coming from Celeste's office. The door was slightly ajar, and one of the voices was definitely hers. The other voice he didn't recognize, male, authoritative, with the particular cadence of someone used to being obeyed. Excessive attention, the unknown voice was saying. The dean is concerned that this has become too much of a spectacle. The competition has always drawn attention, Marcus. Celeste sounded tired. This is hardly unprecedented. Having reporters camped outside the department is unprecedented. Having national media outlets calling for interviews is unprecedented. Having students stage protests demanding that we offer this janitor a faculty position is absolutely unprecedented. A pause. The dean wants to know if you're prepared to handle the fallout, regardless of how the competition ends. I'm prepared. Steel in her voice now. The Euler challenge will be conducted fairly and rigorously. If Mr. Brooks is truly as capable as everyone believes, he'll succeed. If he's not, if his previous performances were flukes or based on preparation for specific problems, that will become clear as well. And if he wins, if this custodian defeats every graduate student in the region on live stream, then we'll have discovered an extraordinary talent in an unexpected place, and the university should be proud to have harbored that talent, however unconventionally. But something in Celeste's tone suggested she didn't quite believe her own words. Malik moved away from the door before they could catch him listening, but the conversation stayed with him as he finished his shift, as he drove home through the pre-dawn darkness, as he lay in bed staring at his ceiling and wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The night before the competition, Malik didn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table with his old MIT notebook spread in front of him, reviewing years of work that felt both intimately familiar and impossibly distant. There was the topology course where he'd finally understood what manifolds really were. The analysis sequence that had nearly broken him until Professor Chen, different life, had shown him how to think about limits in a new way. The research seminar where he'd presented his first original result and felt, for one shining moment, like he belonged. He'd walked away from all of it to take care of his mother, and he'd do it again, without hesitation. But that didn't mean it hadn't cost him something. At 5 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Good luck today. Remember, the mathematics doesn't care about the story. It only cares about the truth." NR Dr. Nadia Reyes, checking in from wherever visiting judges stayed before they destroyed or validated someone's entire life. Malik texted back, "Thank you. I hope the truth is enough." Her response came almost immediately. "It always has been. The question is whether people are ready to see it." At 8 a.m., Malik put on his best clothes, a button-down shirt his mother had bought him for Christmas 3 years ago, slacks that were slightly too long, shoes that squeaked a little when he walked. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw a janitor playing dress-up, a fraud about to be exposed, a dreamer who'd forgotten his place. Then he looked again and saw someone else, a mathematician who'd never stopped being one, even when the world told him he should. Malik locked his apartment and drove toward campus, toward Beaumont Auditorium, toward whatever truth was waiting for him there. The Euler Challenge was about to begin. The parking lot outside Beaumont Auditorium was already 3/4 full when Malik arrived at 8:47 a.m., and the line of people waiting to get inside stretched around the building like a serpent. He recognized students from his cleaning rounds, faculty members whose offices he'd vacuumed at 3 a.m., even a few reporters with press credentials hanging from lanyards around their necks. They all turned to look as he walked past, and the whispers followed him like a wave. "That's him? He looks so normal. I heard he solved Rourke's doctoral problem in under 20 minutes. I heard he's actually a professor from another university doing some kind of social experiment." Malik kept his eyes forward and his breathing steady, focusing on the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other. The doors were being monitored by campus security, 2 guards he recognized from night shifts who nodded at him with expressions that might have been respect or pity. He couldn't tell which. Inside, the auditorium had been transformed. The stage where he'd faced Celeste 3 weeks ago now held a series of long tables, each equipped with a computer monitor, writing materials, and a small camera. Stadium seating rose in steep tiers, and every seat was filled. Large screens flanked both sides of the stage, ready to project the competitors' work for the audience to follow in real time. It looked less like an academic competition and more like a gladiatorial arena. "Mr. Brooks." A young woman with a clipboard appeared at his elbow, her smile professional and tight. "You're at Station 7. Please take your seat. We'll begin the preliminary round at exactly 9 o'clock. Malik made his way to Station 7, acutely aware of the cameras tracking his movement. The other competitors were already seated, 11 of them, ranging from confident graduate students to a nervous-looking undergraduate who couldn't have been older than 19. They glanced at him with expressions that ran the full spectrum from curiosity to hostility. The seat to his left was occupied by a woman in her late 20s with dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail and the kind of focus that suggested she'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. She didn't look at Malik as he sat down, but her posture shifted slightly, a deliberate distance opening up between them. Station 6, on his right, was empty. Then a figure slid into the seat with practiced ease, and Malik found himself looking at a young man who couldn't have been more than 22, wearing a Stanford sweatshirt and the relaxed confidence of someone who'd never doubted their place in any room they entered. "Malik Brooks, right?" The young man extended a hand. "James Chen, second-year PhD at Stanford. I've been following your story. Pretty wild stuff." Malik shook his hand cautiously. "Thanks, I guess." "No, seriously, it's impressive, taking on the establishment like this." James leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, I hope you do well. Rourke's been insufferable this whole semester, and watching her get taken down a peg by someone outside the academic machine, that would be beautiful." I'm not trying to take anyone down. I'm just here to solve problems. Sure, sure, James grinned. But you know what they say. The personal is political, especially in mathematics. Every competition is really about who gets to define what counts as legitimate knowledge. Before Malik could respond to that particular brand of graduate student philosophy, the lights dimmed slightly and a figure walked onto the stage. Dr. Celeste Rourke wore a charcoal gray suit that made her look like she was presiding over a corporate merger rather than a mathematics competition. Her heels clicked against the stage floor with that same metronomic precision Malik remembered from 3 weeks ago. "Welcome to the 43rd Annual Euler Challenge," Celeste said, her voice filling the auditorium without effort. For those unfamiliar with our format, the competition consists of 3 rounds. The preliminary round features 10 problems of moderate difficulty. Competitors have 2 hours to solve as many as possible. The top 6 scorers advance to the intermediate round, which features 5 substantially harder problems over 3 hours. Finally, the top 3 from the intermediate round face a single challenge problem designed to test the absolute limits of creative mathematical thinking. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the competitors. When her eyes landed on Malik, they didn't linger any longer than on anyone else, but he felt the weight of her attention like a physical thing. This year, we're honored to have 2 distinguished guest judges joining me. Dr. Nadia Reyes from MIT, specializing in algebraic topology. A woman in the front row stood briefly, late 50s, silver gray hair, eyes that missed nothing. And Dr. Marcus Thornton from Stanford, whose work in applied analysis has been instrumental in advancing our understanding of nonlinear systems. A man in his 40s stood next, tall and imposing, with the bearing of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. The judges will evaluate not just the correctness of your solutions, but their elegance, efficiency, and clarity of presentation. Mathematics is a language, and like any language, it can be spoken well or poorly. Celeste's smile was sharp. We expect excellence. A technician handed her a tablet, and she glanced at it briefly before continuing. The preliminary round will begin in exactly 5 minutes. During this time, you may not communicate with other competitors, access any external resources, or leave your station without permission. Your work will be displayed on the screens for the audience to follow, though they've been asked to remain silent during active competition periods. Any questions? Silence answered her. Excellent. Good luck to all of you. May the best mathematician win. The lights came up fully, and Malik's monitor flickered to life, displaying a single line of text. Preliminary round begins in 4:47. His heart was hammering against his ribs with enough force that he wondered if the camera could pick it up. Around him, he could hear the other competitors adjusting their positions, cracking knuckles, doing whatever small rituals helped them focus. The woman to his left had closed her eyes and was breathing with deliberate slowness. James Chen was already stretching his fingers like a concert pianist preparing for a performance. Malik closed his eyes and thought about his mother, who'd be watching this from her apartment with Mrs. Chen, and half the building crowded around her television. He thought about Mrs. Patterson, who'd given him the day off without comment. He thought about Dr. Reyes sitting somewhere in that audience, watching for truth beneath the performance. The countdown reached 0, and the monitor changed. Problem 1. Let f(x) be a continuous function on the interval 0 or 1, such that Malik started reading, and the rest of the world fell away. The first problem was calculus, sophisticated calculus, requiring careful manipulation of integrals and limits, but nothing that would challenge someone with serious training. Malik worked through it methodically, his hands moving across the digital tablet they'd provided for writing solutions. His work appeared on the screen behind him, visible to hundreds of watching eyes, but he forced himself not to think about that. 5 minutes later, he had the answer. He glanced around carefully. Most competitors were still working on problem 1, their screens showing various stages of progress. Only James Chen had moved on to problem 2, his fingers flying across his tablet with aggressive confidence. Malik moved to problem 2. Problem 2. Consider a sequence of continuous functions that converges uniformly. Analysis, he recognized immediately. Uniform convergence, limits. the kind of problem that tested whether you really understood the subtle differences between types of convergence. He'd taught this material once, in a lifetime ago, as a TA for an undergraduate real analysis course. 7 minutes later, problem 2 was solved. The pattern continued. Problem 3 was linear algebra, with a twist involving eigenvalues and geometric multiplicity. Problem 4 was a probability question disguised as combinatorics. Problem 5 was number theory, requiring recognition of a pattern that emerged from modular arithmetic. Malik moved through them like water flowing downhill, following the path of least resistance that his training had carved into his mind years ago. He wasn't the fastest. James Chen stayed consistently one problem ahead of him, and the woman to his left was keeping pace, but he was steady, accurate, careful. Problem 6 stopped him cold. Problem 6. Let M be a smooth manifold with topology. Not just topology, but differential topology specifically, the exact field that Celeste Rourke had built her career on. The problem was asking him to prove a result about the structure of fiber bundles, and it required knowledge of concepts that even most graduate students wouldn't encounter until their second or third year. Malik read it 3 times, feeling the trap close around him like a vice. This wasn't testing mathematical ability. This was testing whether he'd been formally trained in advanced topology, whether he'd sat through the specific courses and seminars where these ideas were taught. A brilliant undergraduate might solve the first 5 problems through raw talent and hard work. Only someone with graduate-level training would recognize what problem 6 was really asking. Celeste was calling his bluff. Malik looked up at the screens flanking the stage and saw his own face projected there, caught by the camera at his station. He looked uncertain, worried. Exactly like someone who'd suddenly encountered material beyond their understanding. The audience was watching. The judges were watching. Celeste was watching. He could skip it. Move on to problems 7 through 10, try to make up points elsewhere. That's what someone without formal training would do, someone who'd hit the limit of their self-taught knowledge. Or he could solve it and confirm what Celeste already suspected, that he wasn't just some janitor with a gift for mathematics, but someone with deep, rigorous training in advanced topology. Malik's hands hovered over the tablet. Then he started writing. The solution came slowly, each step requiring careful thought. He drew diagrams to clarify the structure of the fiber bundle, used coordinate charts to analyze the local behavior, applied theorems he'd learned in a classroom at MIT 7 years ago, from a professor whose name he could still remember. His solution was longer than for any previous problem, more technical, more revealing. When he finished, 19 minutes later, he felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the cameras. On the main screens, he could see that only 3 other competitors had attempted problem 6. James Chen had written something brief and moved on, probably a partial solution. The woman to his left was still working on it, her screen filled with crossed-out attempts. And a graduate student 2 stations down had produced a solution almost as complete as Malik's. The preliminary round continued. Problems 7 through 10 were challenging but manageable. Complex analysis, partial differential equations, abstract algebra, and a final problem that mixed graph theory with combinatorial optimization. Malik solved 7 and 8 completely, got most of 9, but couldn't nail down the final step, and ran out of time on 10 with only a partial approach sketched out. When the 2-hour timer hit 0 and the monitors went dark, Malik sat back in his chair and felt the tension drain from his shoulders like water. His right hand was cramping from gripping the stylus, and his eyes felt dry from staring at the screen. "Preliminary round complete," Celeste's voice announced. "Competitors, please remain seated while the judges tabulate scores. This will take approximately 15 minutes. The auditorium erupted in noise, audience members immediately turning to each other to discuss what they'd seen, competitors slumping in their seats or stretching their cramped muscles, the general release of pressure that comes when a test ends. James Chen leaned over toward Malik. "Problem 6 was brutal, man. Where did you even learn that stuff? That's like second-year topology at minimum." Malik kept his expression neutral. "I've done some reading." "Some reading?" James laughed. "Right. Well, your reading is about to get you into the next round. You solved 8 out of 10 clean, and your solution to 6 was textbook perfect. I'm guessing you'll be top 3, easy." The woman to his left, who'd been silent all morning, finally spoke without looking at either of them. Top 3 is Chen, Brooks, and either me or Davidson from Station 3. Everyone else missed too many of the middle problems. Her voice was flat, analytical. Though the judges might weigh elegance differently than completeness. Before anyone could respond, Dr. Reyes stood and approached the microphone at the front of the stage. The audience quieted immediately. The judges have reviewed the preliminary round solutions. I'd like to commend all 12 competitors for their efforts. These were not easy problems, and everyone here demonstrated significant mathematical ability. She glanced at her tablet. However, only 6 can advance. When I call your name, please come forward. She called 6 names. James Chen was first, looking unsurprised. The woman to Malik's left, whose name turned out to be Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a 4th-year graduate student from Princeton, was second. 3 more names Malik didn't recognize. And then, after a pause that felt like it lasted an hour, Malik Brooks. The auditorium exploded in applause and cheers. Malik stood on shaky legs and walked to the front of the stage, joining the other 5 competitors in a line facing the audience. The noise washed over him like a physical force, and he caught sight of faces in the crowd. Students he'd cleaned up after, faculty members he'd never spoken to, strangers who'd traveled here just to watch him compete. In the front row, Dr. Reyes was smiling slightly. Next to her, Dr. Thornton looked thoughtful. And standing to the side of the stage, her expression carefully neutral, was Celeste Rourke. When the applause finally died down, Celeste stepped forward. Congratulations to our 6 advancing competitors. You'll have a 1-hour break for lunch. There's food provided in the Mathematics Commons. The intermediate round begins at 1:30 p.m. I suggest you use this time to rest and prepare. The problems will be substantially harder. The way she said substantially harder made it sound like a promise and a threat. Malik didn't go to the lunch area. He couldn't face the crowds, the questions, the congratulations that felt premature. Instead, he found an empty classroom on the 2nd floor and sat in the darkness, trying to quiet his racing thoughts. He'd made it through the first round, but problem 6 had been a warning shot. Celeste was designing these challenges to force him to reveal his background, to prove that he wasn't just talented but trained. And if the preliminary round was any indication, the intermediate round would push even harder. His phone buzzed. His mother. "Baby, I'm so proud of you. You were amazing. Mrs. Chen is crying. Half the building is here watching. Keep going." Then Dr. Reyes. "Excellent work on problem 6. Your approach to the fiber bundle structure was particularly elegant. Stay focused for this afternoon." And finally, from an unknown number. "You're good, better than I expected. But the real test starts now." J.C. James Chen, apparently. Malik typed back, "Just trying to survive." The response came immediately. "Survival isn't the goal. Winning is. See you out there." Malik put his phone away and closed his eyes. Through the classroom door, he could hear the muffled sounds of the building, footsteps in the hallway, distant conversation, the mechanical hum of ventilation systems, sounds he knew intimately from 4 years of night shifts. This building had been his domain once, a place where he existed in the shadows, invisible and safe. Now he was center stage, and there was no going back. At 1:25 p.m., Malik returned to the auditorium. The 6 advancing competitors were given new stations, arranged in a semicircle facing the audience so that all their screens were visible simultaneously. Malik found himself between Sarah Mitchell and a nervous-looking graduate student from UC Berkeley named Rahman. The audience had swelled even larger. People were standing in the aisles now, and Malik could see additional cameras set up in the back. Someone had made this competition into an event, and he was the main attraction whether he wanted to be or not. Celeste took the stage at exactly 1:30 p.m., accompanied by both guest judges this time. Dr. Thornton from Stanford looked stern, his arms crossed as he surveyed the competitors. Dr. Reyes appeared more relaxed, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. "Welcome to the intermediate round," Celeste began. 5 problems, 3 hours. These problems will require not just technical skill, but creative insight and the ability to synthesize concepts from multiple areas of mathematics. We're looking for elegant solutions that demonstrate deep understanding, not just mechanical competence. She paused, and Malik could have sworn her eyes lingered on him for just a fraction too long. One more thing. In the intermediate round, we've added a twist. Each correct solution is worth base points for completeness, but the judges will award additional points for exceptional elegance or innovative approaches. Two solutions might both be correct, but one might score significantly higher if it shows particular insight or creativity. Celeste's smile was thin. Excellence matters. Dr. Reyes spoke next. This also means that the order you solve problems matters less than how well you solve them. Take your time. Think deeply. We'd rather see 3 brilliant solutions than 5 merely adequate ones. The message was clear. They were testing not just whether you could solve hard problems, but whether you could solve them the right way, with the style and sophistication of a true mathematician. The monitors flickered to life. 3 hours appeared in the countdown. And then, the first problem. Problem 1. Consider a dynamical system on a compact manifold. Malik started reading and felt his stomach drop. This wasn't just harder than the preliminary round. This was different in kind. The problems weren't testing recall or technique. They were testing whether you could see patterns others missed, whether you could make creative leaps that weren't in any textbook. Problem 1 was about dynamical systems, but it required insights from both differential topology and ergodic theory. Problem 2 involved complex analysis, but needed tools from algebraic geometry to make the solution tractable. Problem 3 was pure abstraction, a proof about the structure of certain mathematical objects that demanded you first figure out what the question was really asking beneath its technical language. These were research-level problems, the kind of challenges that might form the basis of a thesis chapter or a publishable paper, and Celeste was asking them to solve 5 of these in 3 hours. Malik looked around and saw a similar realization dawning on the other competitors' faces. James Chen had gone pale. Sarah Mitchell was staring at her screen with an expression of intense concentration that suggested she was recalibrating her entire approach. Rahman looked like he might be sick. This was the trap closing completely. Malik took a deep breath and started with problem 1. The solution required recognizing that the dynamical system had a hidden symmetry, something that wasn't obvious from the initial formulation, but became clear if you reframed the problem in the right coordinate system. He spent 20 minutes just exploring the structure, drawing diagrams, testing ideas. Then, suddenly, he saw it. The system was actually periodic in a disguised form, and that periodicity was the key to everything else. 53 minutes later, he had a complete solution. Not just correct, but elegant. The kind of answer that revealed the underlying beauty of the problem. He looked up at the main screens and saw that only Sarah Mitchell had finished problem 1 as well. Everyone else was still working. Problem 2. Complex analysis with algebraic geometry. Malik recognized the setup immediately. This was related to the theory of Riemann surfaces, one of the most beautiful and challenging areas of pure mathematics. The key was seeing that the complex function they'd defined actually lived naturally on a particular kind of geometric object, and once you recognized that, the problem became almost simple. Almost. The algebra was nightmarish, page after page of careful calculations that had to be exactly right or the whole thing fell apart. Malik worked with methodical precision, checking each step twice, refusing to let speed overcome accuracy. When he finally arrived at the answer, he'd been working for over an hour on this single problem. But the solution was beautiful. He could feel it. On the screens, he saw that James Chen had also finished problem 2, though his approach had been more computational, grinding through the algebra by brute force rather than using the geometric insight. Sarah Mitchell was still working on it. The other 3 competitors had split their efforts. One was attempting problem 3, 2 were still stuck on problem 1. 1 hour remained. Malik looked at problem 3 and felt something click in his mind. The same feeling he used to get at MIT when a research problem suddenly made sense, when all the disparate pieces aligned into a coherent whole. He started writing, his hand moving almost faster than his conscious thought, the mathematics flowing through him like music. The solution came in a rush, 15 minutes of intense focus, where nothing else existed except the problem and his understanding of it. When he finished and looked up, gasping slightly as if he'd been holding his breath, he realized that the auditorium had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching his screen. The solution to problem 3 was displayed on the main monitors, barely 2 pages of work that cut through layers of complexity to expose an elegant, almost obvious answer. It was the kind of solution that made other mathematicians simultaneously jealous and delighted, the kind that looked simple only after someone showed you how to see it. Dr. Reyes was leaning forward in her seat, her expression one of genuine surprise and pleasure. Dr. Thornton had uncrossed his arms and was studying the screen intently. And Celeste's face had gone completely blank, a mask that revealed nothing but hid everything. Malik looked at the timer, 47 minutes remaining. He could try problems 4 and 5, race to complete as many as possible, or he could do what Dr. Reyes had suggested, focus on quality over quantity, ensure his 3 solutions were as good as he could make them. He chose to review his work. For the next 47 minutes, Malik went back through all 3 solutions, checking every step, polishing the presentation, making sure that each line of reasoning was crystal clear. He found a few places where he could tighten the argument, made his diagrams clearer, added brief comments explaining the key insights. When the timer hit 0, he had 3 problems solved, completely, elegantly, and with the kind of clarity that left no room for doubt. The other competitors had mixed results. James Chen had completed 4 problems, though his solutions looked rushed toward the end. Sarah Mitchell had finished 3, like Malik, but her work on problem 2 was less polished. The other 3 competitors had managed 2 problems each, with varying degrees of completeness. Intermediate round complete, Celeste announced. We'll take a 30-minute break while the judges deliberate. This is the most difficult decision of the competition, choosing the top 3 who will face the final challenge. The auditorium buzzed with speculation as the competitors left the stage. Malik found a quiet corner in the hallway outside and leaned against the wall, feeling the exhaustion settling into his bones. His hand was cramping again, and his brain felt like it had been wrung out like a sponge. James Chen found him there. Dude, that solution to problem 3 was insane, like legitimately brilliant. Where did that come from? I don't know, Malik said honestly. I just saw the pattern. You just saw the pattern? James shook his head in disbelief. I spent 20 minutes on that problem and couldn't even figure out what approach to use. You made it look trivial. It wasn't trivial. I know. That's what makes it so impressive. James hesitated, then asked quietly, Who are you really, Malik? Because nobody just sees patterns like that without serious training. That was research-level intuition. Before Malik could answer, Dr. Reyes appeared at the end of the hallway. Mr. Brooks, could I speak with you for a moment? Malik followed her to an empty classroom. She closed the door and turned to face him with an expression that was equal parts impressed and concerned. I need to ask you something directly, she said. And I need you to be honest with me because it's going to matter in about 10 minutes when we announce the finalists. Malik's throat tightened. Okay. Your solution to problem 3 showed intuition that comes from research experience. The way you reformulated the question, the tools you reached for, that's not something you pick up from textbooks or online courses. That's the kind of thinking you develop by working on original problems at the graduate level. Dr. Reyes crossed her arms. I told you I knew about your time at MIT. What I didn't tell you is that I've spent the last 3 weeks reviewing your academic record from that period. Coursework, preliminary exam results, the research you were doing before you left. Malik felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. You were brilliant, Dr. Reyes continued. Top of your cohort, publishable results by your second year, on track for one of the best dissertations the department had seen in years. And then you left suddenly, with no explanation in the official record, just a note that you'd withdrawn from the program for personal reasons. My mother was sick, Malik said quietly. She needed full-time care. There wasn't a choice. I understand. I do. But here's the situation you're in now. If you make the finals and win this competition, which I believe you will, your background is going to come out. Celeste is smart enough to have already started digging. She'll find the MIT connection, and she'll use it to claim that you weren't some unknown janitor genius, but someone with elite training who'd been hiding that fact. Dr. Reyes moved closer, her voice urgent. You need to control this narrative before she does. You need to decide how you want to tell your story. Malik looked at her for a long moment. What do you think I should do? I think you should tell the truth, all of it. Not because you owe anyone an explanation, but because the truth is actually the most powerful story here. You didn't wash out of MIT. You sacrificed an academic career to care for your mother. You didn't hide your background out of shame. You hid it because you needed a job with health insurance, and you knew that being overqualified would close more doors than it opened. You're not pretending to be something you're not. You're someone brilliant who got lost in the cracks of a system that doesn't know how to handle people whose lives don't fit the standard template. She paused, then added softly, "You're exactly the kind of mathematician we should be celebrating, but only if you let people see the whole picture." Before Malik could respond, there was a knock on the door. The graduate student with the clipboard poked her head in. "Dr. Reyes, the judges need you. We're ready to announce the finalists." Dr. Reyes touched Malik's arm briefly. "Whatever you decide, I'm on your side. Remember that." They walked back to the auditorium together, and Malik felt like he was walking toward a cliff edge in the dark, unable to see what lay below, but knowing that the next step would change everything. The 6 competitors assembled on stage once more. The audience was electric with anticipation, thousands of eyes focused on them, cameras capturing every angle, the air thick with expectation. Celeste stood at the microphone with Dr. Thornton and Dr. Reyes flanking her. She held a tablet, and her expression was professionally neutral. The intermediate round demonstrated exceptional mathematical thinking from all 6 competitors. However, 3 stood clearly above the rest in both the quality and insight of their solutions. She glanced at the tablet. The 3 finalists advancing to the challenge round are Sarah Mitchell from Princeton, James Chen from Stanford, and Malik Brooks. The auditorium erupted, but Malik barely heard it over the roaring in his ears. He'd made the finals. In less than an hour, he'd be facing whatever nightmare problem Celeste had designed as the ultimate test. And somewhere in this building, his entire history was about to be exposed. The applause was still echoing through the auditorium when Celeste raised her hand for silence. The gesture was small, almost casual, but the room obeyed instantly. That was her power, Malik realized. Not just her brilliance, but her absolute certainty that she would be heard. "We'll take a 15-minute break before the final round," Celeste announced. "Finalists, please use this time to prepare yourselves mentally. What comes next will test you in ways you haven't experienced today." The 3 of them, Malik, Sarah, and James, were ushered into a small holding room adjacent to the stage. It was windowless and sterile, furnished with nothing but 3 chairs and a water cooler that hummed in the corner like a mechanical heartbeat. Sarah immediately sat down and closed her eyes, her breathing falling into the same deliberate pattern Malik had noticed during the preliminary round. James paced, his Stanford sweatshirt now damp with sweat at the collar. "Anyone else feel like we're about to be executed?" James asked, trying for humor but landing somewhere closer to genuine anxiety. Sarah's eyes opened. "Rourke's going to give us something from her research, something she's been working on. That's what she does when she wants to prove a point." Her voice was flat, analytical, but Malik caught the tremor underneath. "I've studied every paper she's published in the last 5 years. She's been obsessed with a particular class of topological spaces, wild embeddings in higher dimensions. If she pulls from that work, we're looking at something that took her months to solve, and we'll have maybe an hour." "That's not a competition," James said. "That's a setup." "Welcome to academic mathematics," Sarah replied without opening her eyes again. Malik said nothing. He was watching the door, half expecting Celeste to walk through it with that tablet in her hands, and his entire MIT history displayed on the screen. Dr. Reyes had said he needed to control the narrative, but how could he control something that was already spiraling beyond his reach? Every camera out there was pointed at him. Every reporter was already writing the story in their heads. The truth wasn't going to set him free. It was going to define him forever. His phone buzzed. His mother. "Baby, whatever happens next, remember why you're there. Not for them, for you." He typed back with shaking hands. "I don't know if I can do this." Her response came immediately. "You already are." The door opened and the graduate student with the clipboard appeared. 2 minutes, they're ready for you." James stopped pacing. Sarah stood and rolled her shoulders like a boxer preparing for a fight. And Malik followed them out of the holding room and back onto the stage, where 3 stations had been set up in a line facing the audience like a firing squad arrangement. The auditorium had somehow filled even more during the break. People were sitting on the steps, standing 3 deep along the walls, crowding the doorways. Malik could see local news cameras in the back now, their red lights glowing like predatory eyes. This had stopped being a university mathematics competition and become something else entirely, a spectacle, a story, a moment that people would remember and argue about for years. And he was at the center of it, wearing his Christmas shirt and his 2 long pants and the weight of 4 years of invisibility that was about to shatter completely. The 3 judges sat at a table directly in front of the stage. Dr. Thornton looked grave, his hands folded on the table in front of him. Dr. Reyes met Malik's eyes briefly and gave the smallest nod. Solidarity or warning, he couldn't tell. And Celeste sat in the center, perfectly composed, a folder resting closed in front of her like a sealed verdict. "The final round," Celeste began, and the room fell silent so completely that Malik could hear his own heartbeat, "is designed to test not just technical ability or creative insight, but mathematical maturity. The ability to face a problem you don't immediately understand, to sit with discomfort and uncertainty, and to find your way through to a solution using every tool at your disposal. This is what separates good mathematicians from great ones, the capacity to work at the absolute edge of your understanding and push beyond it." She opened the folder and removed a single sheet of paper. "The problem you're about to see took me 8 months to solve during my doctoral work. It formed the centerpiece of my dissertation and led to 3 published papers. I'm not telling you this to intimidate you, but to calibrate your expectations. You will have 90 minutes. We are not expecting a complete solution. We are looking for approach, insight, the quality of your mathematical thinking when faced with something genuinely difficult." Dr. Reyes leaned forward. "I want to add something to Dr. Rourke's framing. Yes, this problem was difficult for her, for anyone. But mathematics isn't about recreating someone else's path. It's about finding your own. The solution Dr. Rourke found 8 years ago may not be the only solution or even the best one. We're interested in seeing how you think, what tools you reach for, what connections you make. There's no single right way forward here." Dr. Thornton spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of decades in the field. "One more thing. If at any point you feel you've hit a genuine wall, not just difficulty, but a true impossibility given the time constraints, you may choose to explain your approach so far and outline how you would continue given more time. Partial credit will be awarded for demonstrated understanding and clear mathematical reasoning. This isn't about tricking you, it's about seeing how you work." The 3 finalists took their positions. Malik's hands were shaking as he gripped the stylus. On the screen to his left, he could see Sarah's face, pale but focused. On his right, James was breathing hard, his jaw tight with determination. The monitors flickered to life. 90 minutes appeared in the countdown, and then the problem. Malik read the first line and felt his stomach turn to ice. "Let M be a smooth manifold of dimension n, and consider a proper embedding F, M, R, 2n+1. Define the wild set WF as the collection of points where..." It was worse than Sarah had predicted. This wasn't just from Celeste's research. This was the heart of it, the problem that had made her reputation, dressed up in slightly different notation, but fundamentally the same monstrous question about the structure of high-dimensional spaces that Malik remembered reading about in her published work. She was asking them to recreate, in 90 minutes, what had taken her most of a year. It was impossible. The audience must have sensed it too, because the silence had taken on a different quality, not anticipation, but apprehension, the collective realization that they were watching something brutal unfold. Malik forced himself to keep reading. The problem had 3 parts, each building on the last. Part 1 asked them to establish a basic property of the wild set. Part 2 required proving that this set had certain topological characteristics under specific conditions. Part 3, the part that would have been the core of Celeste's dissertation, asked them to determine the complete topological structure of the wild set in a particular case. Completing all 3 parts in 90 minutes wasn't just unlikely. It was genuinely impossible for anyone who hadn't already spent months thinking about this specific problem, which meant Celeste wasn't testing their ability to solve it. She was testing how they failed. Malik looked up at the screens showing the other competitors. James had started writing immediately, his approach aggressive and computational, trying to brute force his way through part 1 with sheer algebraic manipulation. Sarah was still reading, her screen blank, her expression suggesting she was trying to map out a complete strategy before committing to anything. Malik closed his eyes and let himself sink into the problem. The mathematics was dense, technical, wrapped in layers of abstraction that would take hours just to unpack. But underneath all that complexity, there was a question being asked. What was the structure of these wild sets? What made them wild in the first place? He started writing, not a solution, but an exploration. What tools did he have? Differential topology, algebraic topology, some techniques from geometric measure theory he'd learned in a seminar at MIT. What was the problem really asking beneath all the technical language? It was asking about the boundary between tame behavior and chaos in high-dimensional spaces. 20 minutes in, Malik had filled 3 pages with diagrams and preliminary calculations. He hadn't solved anything yet, but he was beginning to see the shape of the problem, the way different parts connected, the places where standard techniques would fail, the points where creative insight would be necessary. On the main screens, he could see that James had completed something, a partial solution to part 1 that looked technically correct but used such heavy machinery that extending it to parts 2 and 3 would be nearly impossible. Sarah had also started writing, her approach more geometric, trying to visualize the problem in ways that made the abstract structure more concrete. Malik kept working, following threads of logic that led into dead ends, backing up, trying different approaches. The problem fought him at every step. Layers of complexity that had to be peeled back carefully, calculations that spiraled into Baroque algebra, concepts that slipped through his fingers just when he thought he had them. 40 minutes in, he had a breakthrough on part 1. Not the same solution Celeste had published, but something different, a way of reformulating the definition of the wild set that made certain properties obvious. It was elegant, economical, and it opened a path toward part 2 that he hadn't seen before. He wrote faster now, the mathematics flowing through him with the particular intensity that came when you were genuinely onto something. The solution wasn't complete, wouldn't be complete in the time remaining, but it was real, substantial, a genuine contribution to understanding the problem. 60 minutes in, Malik looked up and realized that James had stopped writing. His screen showed a partial solution to part 1, some notes toward part 2, and then nothing. He'd hit the wall. Sarah was still working, her screen dense with calculations, but Malik could see from the crossed-out sections and restarts that she was struggling with the same obstacles he'd encountered. Malik turned back to his own work. Part 2 was asking about topological characteristics, specifically whether the wild set was closed under certain operations. He attacked it using the reformulation he'd found in part 1, combining it with a classical result from algebraic topology that most people wouldn't think to apply in this context. The calculation was intricate, requiring page after page of careful reasoning. Malik checked each step twice, knowing that a single error would cascade through everything that followed. His hand cramped, his eyes burned, his brain felt like it was operating at the absolute limit of its capacity. And then, with 17 minutes remaining, he saw it. The answer to part 2 wasn't what Celeste's published paper had claimed, or rather it was, but only under more restrictive conditions than she'd stated. There was a gap in the published proof, a place where she'd made an assumption that seemed reasonable but wasn't quite justified, and that gap meant the result was weaker than she'd thought, that the topological structure was less constrained than her work had suggested. Malik's hand froze over the tablet. He could finish part 2 using Celeste's approach, accept the assumption, and produce a solution that matched her published work. Safe. Expected. The answer everyone thought was correct. Or he could write what he'd actually found, that there was an error in one of the most important papers of Celeste Rourke's career, discovered by a janitor in the middle of a competition she'd designed to expose him. The timer showed 15 minutes. Malik started writing the truth. His solution to part 2 was careful, rigorous, showing exactly where the gap appeared and why it mattered. He didn't have time to fully correct it. That would require techniques he'd need hours to develop. But he outlined how one could approach fixing it, what additional constraints would be necessary, what the corrected result would look like. When the timer hit 0, Malik had completed Part 1 fully, had a substantial partial solution to Part 2 that identified a genuine error in the literature, and had written a 2-page outline for how he would approach Part 3 given more time. The auditorium was silent as the three competitors set down their styluses. On the main screens, their work was displayed side by side. James had a completed solution to Part 1 and fragmentary notes on Part 2. Sarah had made significant progress on both Parts 1 and 2, her solutions technically sound but following conventional approaches. And Malik's screen showed something different, less complete in raw terms, but containing something that made Dr. Reyes stand up slowly from her seat. "Mr. Brooks," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "in your solution to Part 2, you've claimed that the published result is incorrect. Can you elaborate on that?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Malik swallowed hard. "Not incorrect exactly. The conclusion is probably right, but the proof has a gap. Here." He pointed to a section of his work. "This step assumes that the boundary operator commutes with a particular limiting process. That's true for well-behaved spaces, but the whole point of wild sets is that they're not well-behaved. You need additional conditions to justify the commutation, and those conditions aren't established in the proof." Celeste had gone very still. Dr. Thornton was leaning forward, studying Malik's work on the screen with intense focus, and Dr. Reyes had a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Dr. Rourke," Dr. Thornton said slowly, "this is your work he's referencing, your 2017 paper in the Annals of Mathematics. What's your response?" Every eye in the auditorium turned to Celeste. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she stood, walked to the stage, and studied Malik's solution on the screen directly. Her face was a mask, revealing nothing. The silence stretched so long that people started shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Finally, Celeste spoke. "He's right." The room erupted, gasps, exclamations, the sudden roar of hundreds of people talking at once. Celeste raised her hand for silence, and again the room obeyed, though more slowly this time. "The gap Mr. Brooks identified is real. I've known about it for 3 years, found it myself while working on a follow-up paper. I published a correction in a different journal, adding the necessary conditions to make the proof rigorous. But the original paper stands in the literature with that gap, and most people reading it wouldn't catch it without significant effort." She turned to look at Malik directly. "The fact that you found it in, 20 minutes of working on Part 2 is remarkable. It took me 6 months to realize something was wrong with my own proof." Dr. Reyes was grinning now, not even trying to hide it. "I think we can suspend deliberations. The judges need to discuss these solutions in detail, but I want to say something first." She looked out at the audience. "What we just witnessed is mathematics at its highest level. Not just solving problems, but understanding them deeply enough to find the places where even published, peer-reviewed work has subtle errors. That's the kind of thinking that advances the field. That's what mathematical maturity actually looks like." Dr. Thornton nodded slowly. "Agreed. Though I think we should take 30 minutes to review all 3 solutions properly. The final ranking needs to reflect not just the breakthrough in Part 2, but the complete body of work." The 3 finalists were sent back to the holding room while the judges deliberated. The moment the door closed, James let out a long breath. "Did you actually just find an error in Rourke's most famous paper, in the middle of a competition she designed, while she was watching?" "I didn't mean to," Malik said quietly. "I was just working through the proof, and it didn't make sense." "It didn't make sense to you. It made sense to everyone else who's read that paper for 7 years. James laughed, slightly manic. "Man, you're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the most oblivious." Sarah spoke without opening her eyes. "He's neither. He's just doing mathematics the way it's supposed to be done, following the logic wherever it leads, regardless of who published what or what the social consequences might be." She opened her eyes and looked at Malik. "For what it's worth, your solution was better than mine. More creative, deeper insight. If they don't rank you first, it'll be politics, not mathematics." "Does it matter?" Malik asked. "Winning, I mean. Everything's already changed. I can't go back to just cleaning buildings and pretending this never happened." "No," Sarah agreed. "You can't. But that's not because of the competition. That's because you're too good to stay invisible. This, she gestured vaguely toward the door, the stage, the auditorium beyond, just forced the issue faster than it would have happened otherwise. The 30 minutes stretched into 45. Malik spent them staring at his phone, reading messages that had been piling up all day. His mother had sent 12 texts, each one a variation on "I'm proud of you." Mrs. Patterson had sent one, "Whatever happens, you did good." And there was a message from Dr. Reyes. "The judges are in unanimous agreement. Trust me." Finally, the door opened. Not the graduate student this time, but Celeste herself. She looked at the three of them with an expression Malik couldn't quite read, something more complex than anger or disappointment, something that might have been respect mixed with something else he couldn't name. "They're ready for you," she said. Then looking directly at Malik, "Can I speak with you for a moment? Alone?" Sarah and James exchanged glances, then filed out. The door closed, leaving Malik and Celeste in the small room with its humming water cooler and sterile furniture. "I owe you an apology," Celeste said, and Malik's brain stalled trying to process those words coming from her mouth. "I designed this competition to expose you, to prove that you weren't what everyone seemed to think you were. That you were either a fraud or someone with hidden credentials who'd been playing games with the narrative. I wanted to strip away the mythology and show that genius doesn't just appear from nowhere, that training and institutions matter." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I was wrong. Not about institutions mattering, they do, but about you. You're not a fraud, and you weren't playing games. You're just someone who got caught between two worlds and paid a price for it that nobody should have to pay." Malik found his voice. "How did you find out?" "About MIT. Dr. Reyes told me. About an hour ago during our deliberation. She thought I should know the full story before we announced the results. That you'd been a doctoral student there, that you'd left to care for your mother, that you'd been working as a custodian because it was the only job you could find that provided the health insurance you needed." Celeste's expression shifted, and for the first time since Malik had met her, she looked uncertain. "I've been operating from a place of tremendous privilege my entire life. My parents paid for my education, I never had to work during my PhD, I could focus entirely on mathematics without worrying about anything else. I couldn't imagine why someone would hide that kind of training. But you weren't hiding it out of shame. You were hiding it because the system doesn't know what to do with people whose lives are complicated. You still think I should have told people. I think you did what you needed to survive. And I think I made that survival harder by turning this competition into a public trial." She met his eyes. "I'm going to say this in front of everyone after we announce the results. I want you to know it's not for show. I was wrong about you, wrong about what this competition should be testing, wrong about a lot of things." Before Malik could respond, there was a knock on the door. Time was up. They walked back to the auditorium together, and Malik felt like he was in someone else's body, watching himself from a distance as he took his place on stage between Sarah and James. The three judges sat at their table. The audience was packed so tightly now that fire codes were probably being violated. Cameras were everywhere, and Malik stood there in his Christmas shirt, about to hear a verdict that would define the rest of his life. Dr. Thornton spoke first. The final round presented the competitors with a genuinely research-level problem. All three demonstrated impressive mathematical ability and creativity. James Chen's solution showed strong technical skills and persistence. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's work was rigorous and methodical, with particularly elegant handling of the geometric aspects. And Malik Brooks' solution, while less complete in terms of raw coverage, showed exceptional depth of insight and mathematical maturity. Dr. Reyes took over. "The judges were unanimous in our assessment. The winner of this year's Euler Challenge, by a significant margin, is Malik Brooks." The auditorium exploded, not just applause, but something wilder. People standing and cheering and shouting, a wave of noise that crashed over the stage like a physical force. Malik stood frozen, unable to process it, unable to feel anything except a strange emptiness where relief or joy should have been. Celeste walked to the microphone. The noise died down gradually, people sensing that something more was coming. "Before we conclude," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I need to say something. This competition was designed to be difficult. That's its purpose. But I designed it with the specific intention of testing Mr. Brooks in ways that would force him to reveal his background and training. I wanted to prove that the mythology around him was exactly that, mythology, that nobody succeeds in mathematics without formal training and institutional support. She paused, and Malik could see her gathering herself. I was operating from flawed assumptions. Malik Brooks did have formal training. He was a doctoral student at MIT, one of the most promising in his cohort, until he left the program to care for his sick mother. He's been working as a custodian for 4 years, not because he lacked ability, but because he needed health insurance, and the academic world doesn't have space for people whose careers don't follow the standard timeline. I didn't know this when I challenged him 3 weeks ago. I found out today, during our deliberations. And I need to acknowledge that my entire approach to this competition was shaped by privilege I didn't recognize and assumptions I never questioned. The auditorium had gone completely silent. Malik Brooks didn't pretend to be something he wasn't. He simply existed in a space where his brilliance was invisible because nobody was looking for it there. And when he was finally seen, I tried to expose him as a fraud instead of asking why the system had made him invisible in the first place. Celeste looked at Malik. "I'm sorry. You deserved better. From me, from this institution, from all of us." She stepped back from the microphone. Dr. Reyes stood up, and the applause started again. Different this time, thoughtful rather than ecstatic, the sound of people processing something more complex than a simple victory. Malik barely heard it. He was watching Celeste, trying to understand what had just happened, what it meant that the woman who'd tried to destroy him had just publicly apologized and told his story for him, taking away his choice but also taking away the burden of explaining himself. Dr. Reyes handed him something, a certificate, he realized distantly, heavy paper in an elegant frame. The Euler Challenge Trophy. Evidence that he'd won. "Speech!" someone shouted from the audience. The cry was taken up by others. "Speech! Speech!" Malik looked out at the hundreds of faces watching him, waiting for him to say something profound or inspiring or redemptive. He thought about everything he could say, about his mother, about MIT, about 4 years of cleaning buildings while his mind slowly crystallized with disuse, about what it cost to be invisible and what it cost to be seen. Instead, he said, "I just wanted to do mathematics." His voice cracked on the last word and he realized he was crying, had been crying for a while without noticing. That's all I've ever wanted. Not fame, not to prove anything, not to challenge anyone's assumptions, just to do mathematics. And for 4 years I couldn't. Not really. I could clean buildings and think about problems in my head and pretend that was enough. But it wasn't. And I don't know what happens now. I don't know if winning this competition changes anything real about my life or if it's just performance. But for today, for these few hours, I got to do mathematics again. I got to sit with hard problems and push myself and find something true. And that, he stopped, trying to find words for something that didn't have words. That's all I wanted. Thank you. He walked off the stage while the applause was still building, pushed through the crowd that tried to stop him, ignored the reporters shouting questions and the students trying to shake his hand. He made it to the second-floor classroom where he'd hidden during lunch and locked the door behind him, then sank into a chair in the darkness and let himself fall completely apart. He'd won. He'd solved the unsolvable problem, found an error in a famous proof, received a public apology from one of the most respected mathematicians in the field, and become something like a symbol for everyone who'd ever been overlooked or dismissed or told they didn't belong. And all he felt was exhausted and terrified and utterly uncertain about what came next. His phone buzzed. His mother. "Come home, baby, when you're ready. I made food. We can talk, or we can just sit, whatever you need." Malik texted back, "On my way." He wiped his face, straightened his Christmas shirt, and walked out of the classroom toward the parking lot. Behind him, the auditorium was still full of noise, people analyzing his solutions, debating the implications, turning him into a story they could tell themselves about merit and opportunity and the myths they lived by. But Malik was done being a story for today. He had a long drive ahead of him, and his mother was waiting with food and quiet and the kind of understanding that didn't need speeches or apologies or explanations. Everything else could wait until tomorrow. The drive to his mother's apartment took 37 minutes, But Malik barely registered the passing landscape. His hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity, his mind replaying fragments of the day in disjointed flashes. Celeste's apology, the error in her proof, Dr. Reyes's knowing smile, the weight of the trophy he'd left sitting on the passenger seat like an artifact from someone else's life. When he pulled into the parking lot at Riverside, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the subsidized housing complex in shades of amber and gold that almost made it look beautiful. Almost. The cracked pavement and peeling paint remained stubbornly visible beneath the flattering light. His mother's apartment was on the third floor, and Malik took the stairs slowly, each step feeling like it required a conscious decision to continue. By the time he reached her door, he could smell the food, his mother's chicken adobo, the recipe she'd learned from her Filipino coworker 30 years ago and had been making for special occasions ever since. She opened the door before he could knock. She must have been watching from the window. "Baby," she said, and that single word contained everything: pride, concern, love, understanding. She was in her wheelchair, oxygen tube in place, but her eyes were bright and fierce. "Come here." Malik collapsed into her arms like he was 7 years old again, and she held him while he cried for the second time that day. Mrs. Chen from downstairs was there, and Mr. Okafor from across the hall, and at least 5 other neighbors crowded into the small living room, but none of them said anything. They just let him break apart and trusted his mother to put him back together. When Malik finally pulled away, his mother's hands cupped his face. "Tell me everything. The real everything, not the version you think I want to hear." So he did. He told her about finding the error in Celeste's proof, about the impossible problem that he'd somehow partially solved, about the public apology that had stripped away his privacy while trying to give him dignity. He told her about the terror he'd felt on that stage, the certainty that he was about to be exposed as a fraud, even though he'd done nothing wrong. He told her about Dr. Reyes knowing his history, about James Chen's manic laughter, about Sarah Mitchell's quiet assertion that he was simply doing mathematics the way it was supposed to be done. "And now everyone knows," he finished, "about MIT, about leaving, about why I've been cleaning buildings. It's all public, and I don't know if that makes things better or worse." His mother was quiet for a long moment, her hand still holding his face. "Do you know what I thought, watching you up there today? I thought, that's my son doing what he was born to do. Not cleaning buildings, that was survival. But this? This was you being yourself completely. And yes, everyone knows now, your privacy is gone. But baby, your invisibility is gone too, and those aren't the same thing." "I liked being invisible," Malik said quietly. "It was safe. It was suffocating. I watched you die a little bit every year, working those night shifts, pretending that mopping floors was enough for a mind like yours. I never said anything because I knew you were doing it for me. And I love you too much to make you choose between your dreams and keeping me alive. But I hated it, every single day." She released his face and gripped his hands instead. "So if today blew up your safe little invisible life, then good. You deserve better than safety. You deserve to be seen." Mrs. Chen spoke up from the kitchen, where she was serving adobo onto mismatched plates. "Your mother called everyone in the building to watch. We were all screaming when you won," Mr. Okafor cried. "I had something in my eye," Mr. Okafor protested, but he was smiling. They ate together, all of them crowded into the small apartment, and for a little while Malik could pretend that nothing had changed. But his phone kept buzzing with messages and notifications, the outside world refusing to let him rest. Finally, around 8 p.m., he checked it properly and felt his stomach drop. 217 unread messages, 47 missed calls, his email inbox had exploded past 1,000 unread, and the notifications from social media, which he rarely used, were scrolling too fast to count. "What is it?" his mother asked, seeing his expression. "I think I broke the internet." He wasn't entirely joking. The video of the final round had been posted online and had already passed 3 million views. News outlets were running stories with headlines like, "Janitor defeats elite mathematicians," "Hidden genius discovered at Whitmore University," and an MIT dropout exposes error in famous proof. Someone had created a hashtag, Patchat Malik Brooks, that was trending nationally. Think pieces were being written. Hot takes were being fired off. Everyone had an opinion about what his story meant. And buried in the tsunami of noise were a few messages that actually mattered. Dr. Reyes, we need to talk about your future. Call me when you're ready, Dr. Thornton from Stanford. Our department would like to discuss opportunities. 3 different universities offering to review his academic record for possible reinstatement. A hedge fund, bizarrely, asking if he'd be interested in quantitative research positions. And one message from Celeste Rourke sent 2 hours ago. I meant what I said today. If you're willing to talk, I'd like to try to make this right. No cameras, no audience. Just 2 mathematicians having a conversation. Malik showed his mother the phone. She read through the messages with the same careful attention she'd once given to medical bills and insurance forms. The skill of someone who'd spent a lifetime navigating systems that weren't designed for people like them. What do you want? She asked finally. Not what you think you should want, not what would make the best story. What do you actually want? Malik thought about it, really thought about it, letting himself imagine possibilities he'd locked away 4 years ago. I want to finish what I started at MIT. I want to do research, publish papers, contribute something real to mathematics. I want to teach, maybe, help other students who don't fit the standard mold. And I want... He stopped, surprised by what he was about to say. I want to talk to Celeste Rourke, not because I forgive her, not yet, but because I think she actually means it, the apology. And maybe we could both learn something. His mother smiled. Then that's what you do. But baby, promise me something. Anything. Don't let them turn you into a symbol and forget you're a person. You're not the janitor who became a mathematician. You're Malik Brooks, who happened to be a janitor while remaining a mathematician the whole time. Don't let anyone simplify that, not even people who mean well. I promise. She kissed his forehead. Now go home and sleep. Tomorrow, you start building whatever comes next. But tonight, you rest. Malik drove home through streets that looked exactly the same as they had that morning, but felt completely different. His apartment, a studio in a converted building near campus, was dark and quiet when he arrived. He set the trophy on his desk, still in its frame, and stared at it for a long time before finally turning away. He slept for 12 hours straight, dreamless and deep, and woke up to find that the world had continued to lose its mind about him while he was unconscious. But mixed in with the chaos were concrete things: meeting requests, preliminary job offers, and an email from Dr. Reyes with the subject line, "Let's talk about your next steps." Malik made coffee, opened his laptop, and started responding to messages. Not all of them. That would take weeks, but the ones that mattered. He accepted Dr. Reyes's invitation to talk. He thanked the universities that had reached out, and he replied to Celeste Rourke's message with a simple, "Coffee? Tomorrow morning?" Her response came within minutes. The cafe on Elm Street. 9 a.m. Thank you for giving me this chance. That night, unable to sleep despite his 12-hour marathon, Malik pulled out his old MIT notebooks and started working through the research he'd abandoned 4 years ago. His doctoral dissertation had been on the structure of certain topological invariants, work that had been novel and promising before he'd left. Looking at it now with fresh eyes, he could see places where his thinking had been immature, approaches that could be refined, connections he hadn't noticed at the time. It wasn't dead work. It could be revived, completed, published. The realization hit him like a physical force. He could go back. Not to MIT necessarily, not to the exact life he'd left behind, but to mathematics itself. The 4 years hadn't been wasted. They'd given him perspective, forced him to think about why mathematics mattered, shown him what it felt like to lose something you loved. And now, impossibly, he was being given a chance to reclaim it. He worked until 3 a.m., filling pages with calculations and ideas, and fell asleep at his desk with a pencil still in his hand. The cafe on Elm Street was a student favorite. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, coffee that was strong enough to fuel all-nighters, but not quite good enough to be pretentious about. Malik arrived at 8:45 a.m. and ordered a black coffee, then sat at a corner table where he could see the door. Celeste arrived at exactly 9 a.m. She was dressed casually, jeans, a simple sweater, no makeup that Malik could detect, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked uncertain. She ordered her own coffee and sat down across from him with careful deliberation, like she was approaching a mathematical proof that might collapse if she moved too quickly. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," Malik admitted. "But I kept thinking about what you said, about privilege and assumptions. And I figured if you were willing to say that in front of everyone, the least I could do was hear you out in private." Celeste wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she needed the warmth. "I've been thinking about how to explain this in a way that doesn't sound like I'm making excuses. I don't think I can. So I'll just tell you what I've realized over the past 48 hours. She took a breath. "I built my entire identity around being the smartest person in the room. That was my value, my worth, the thing that made me matter. And then you appeared and demonstrated abilities that threatened that identity. And my first instinct was to destroy you rather than examine why I felt threatened. You thought I was a fraud. I thought you had to be. Because if you weren't, if you were genuinely that talented without all the institutional validation I'd collected like armor, then what did my achievements actually mean?" She met his eyes. "It sounds petty when I say it out loud. It was petty, but it was also deeply felt. I was terrified of you, Malik. Not of your mathematics, but of what your existence suggested about everything I'd built my life on." Malik sipped his coffee, trying to process this level of honesty from someone who'd spent weeks trying to humiliate him. "What changed? Why the apology?" "Dr. Reyes told me your story, the full story. MIT, your mother, the choices you made. And I realized I'd been asking completely the wrong question. I'd been asking, is he legitimate? When I should have been asking, what does it say about our field that someone this talented could disappear into custodial work and we never noticed?" Celeste's voice dropped. "We failed you. I failed you. And then when you became visible, instead of asking how to support you, I tried to prove you didn't deserve support. That's not just wrong. It's a betrayal of everything mathematics is supposed to be about." "Mathematics is supposed to be about truth," Malik said quietly. "Not about who deserves to find it." "Exactly. And I forgot that. I let ego and insecurity turn me into someone who gatekeeps truth instead of pursuing it." She paused, then added, "I want to help fix that. Not just for you, but systemically. There are probably dozens of people like you, talented, trained, lost in the gaps between how the academic world works and how people's lives actually work. We should be finding them, supporting them, creating pathways back into mathematics for people whose careers don't follow the standard timeline." Malik studied her face, looking for signs of performance or manipulation, but all he saw was exhaustion and sincerity and something that looked like genuine remorse. "What does that actually look like? Helping fix it?" Celeste pulled out her phone and opened a document. "I've been working on a proposal for Whitmore's administration, a fellowship program for people with mathematical training who've had to leave academia for personal reasons, caregiving, health issues, financial pressures, whatever. Fully funded, flexible schedule designed to help them complete degrees or transition into research positions or teaching careers. I'm calling it the Brooks Fellowship." Malik's breath caught. "You want to name it after me?" "I want to name it after what you represent. The idea that brilliance doesn't expire just because life gets in the way. That we have an obligation to create structures that account for how complicated people's lives actually are." She pushed the phone across the table. "Read it. Tell me if I'm missing something, if there are barriers I haven't thought of. You've lived this. I've only theorized about it." Malik read through the proposal, and despite himself, he felt something loosening in his chest. It was thoughtful, comprehensive, addressing practical concerns like healthcare and childcare, and the fact that people who've been out of academia need time to ramp back up. It wasn't perfect, no policy document ever was, but it was real, substantive, a genuine attempt to change the system that had failed him. "This could actually help people," he said finally. "That's the goal, and I want your input on refining it. But more than that." Celeste hesitated, then pushed forward. "I want to offer you something, not charity, not pity, a genuine research collaboration. You found an error in my work that I took years to catch myself. That's not luck. That's talent plus training plus the kind of fresh perspective that comes from approaching problems without preconceptions. We could do good work together. Malik set down his coffee cup. You spent 3 weeks designing a competition specifically to humiliate me, and now you want to collaborate on research. I know how it sounds. I know I have no right to ask. But here's the truth. You're one of the best mathematical minds I've encountered in my entire career. You see things other people miss. You find elegant solutions where others find only brute force. And I was so busy trying to protect my ego that I almost destroyed someone who could have been a colleague, a collaborator, maybe even a friend. Celeste's voice cracked slightly. I'm asking for a chance to make this right. Not by erasing what I did. I can't do that. But by building something better going forward. Malik was quiet for a long time, watching steam rise from his coffee and thinking about his mother's words. Don't let them turn you into a symbol and forget you're a person. But maybe being a person meant allowing for the possibility of change, of forgiveness that wasn't the same as forgetting. I need conditions, he said finally. If we're going to work together, even hypothetically, name them. First, you don't get to define my narrative. I'm not the janitor you rescued or the hidden genius you discovered. I'm Malik Brooks, mathematician, period. Second, if we publish together, it's as equals. No junior authorship, no footnote acknowledgments. Equal contribution, equal credit. Third, you actually listen when I tell you that something in the academic system is broken. Don't just nod and then do things the way they've always been done. Celeste nodded slowly. I can agree to all of that, and I'll add a fourth condition myself. If I slip back into old patterns, if I start treating you as less than equal, if I make assumptions based on credentials instead of merit, you call me on it immediately. Don't be polite. Don't give me the benefit of the doubt. Just tell me I'm being an asshole. Despite everything, Malik smiled slightly. Deal. They shook hands across the table, and something shifted. Not trust. That would take time, if it came at all. But the possibility of trust. The beginning of something that might eventually become a genuine professional relationship. So what now? Celeste asked. Have you thought about what you want to do, Doctor? Reyes mentioned several universities have reached out. They have. MIT wants to talk about reinstatement. Stanford's offered to review my previous work. Princeton's interested in a postdoc position. Malik paused. But honestly, I think I want to stay here, at Whitmore. Celeste looked surprised. Why? No offense to my institution, but you could write your ticket to any top program in the country right now. Because this is where the story happened. This is where people know that I was cleaning their buildings and then solving their problems. If I disappear to MIT or Stanford, I become exactly what you said, a feel-good story about talent being discovered. But if I stay here, build a career here, maybe help create this fellowship program you're talking about, then I'm proof that the system can actually change. Malik met her eyes. Plus, my mother's here, and I'm done choosing between mathematics and family. I need to find a way to have both. Then let's make that happen. Celeste pulled out her phone again. I'm meeting with the dean tomorrow to discuss the Brooks Fellowship. Come with me, not as my assistant or my project, as a co-author of the proposal. Help me pitch it. Show them exactly why this matters. You think they'll listen? They'll listen to you. You're a viral sensation who just won their most prestigious competition and found an error in published research. You have more leverage right now than most tenured faculty. Use it. They talked for another hour, mapping out possibilities. Celeste suggested Malik could finish his doctorate through Whitmore's mathematics department while working on research. She offered to supervise his dissertation if MIT wouldn't reinstate him, and to use her connections to ensure his previous work received proper credit. They discussed potential research directions, ways to refine the fellowship proposal, strategies for navigating the media attention that wasn't going to disappear overnight. By the time Malik left the cafe, the sun was high in a cloudless sky, and he felt something he hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope that was more than just a word he told himself to keep going. The meeting with the dean happened on a Tuesday morning in an office that smelled like old books and furniture polish. Dean Margaret Hartwell was a severe woman in her 60s who'd built her career on administrative efficiency and careful stewardship of university resources. She listened to their proposal with an expression that revealed nothing, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When they finished, she set down her pen and looked at Malik directly. Mr. Brooks, I'm going to be frank with you. This proposal is going to cost the university significant money, probably $500,000 per year once fully operational. I need to know this isn't just about feel-good optics. I need to know we're going to find real talent through this program, that it's worth the investment. Malik had prepared for this question. Dean Hartwell, how many people with PhD-level training in STEM fields are currently working in positions that don't use that training? The numbers vary, but estimates suggest tens of thousands nationally. Most left academia because of personal circumstances, but their skills didn't disappear. They're driving for Uber, working retail, doing contract work, anything that pays bills and provides healthcare. Some would return to mathematics if there was a viable path. Not all. Some have moved on, and that's fine. But the ones who would return? Those are people with already proven ability who need support, not remedial training. That's actually more efficient than recruiting new graduate students and hoping they work out. He's right, Celeste added. I've done preliminary research on this. We're not talking about taking risks on unknown quantities. We're talking about reclaiming talent that the system already identified as exceptional and then abandoned when their lives got complicated. The ROI could actually be better than our traditional recruitment pipeline. Dean Hartwell was quiet for a moment. Dr. Rourke, I've known you for 8 years. You've never shown interest in policy reform or administrative innovation. Why now? Celeste didn't hesitate. Because I was wrong about a lot of things. And when you're wrong, you have two choices. Defend the wrongness or try to fix what made you wrong in the first place. I'm choosing to fix it. The dean's expression softened slightly. Mr. Brooks, what do you get out of this? If the fellowship launches, you won't be eligible. You're already being fast-tracked back into doctoral work. This helps future people, not you. That's exactly why I care, Malik said. I got lucky. I got noticed because I couldn't keep my mouth shut during a lecture. But how many others are out there who stay quiet, who never get that chance moment, who just disappear? If I can help create a system that catches them before they're lost, that matters more than what happens to me personally. Dean Hartwell made a few more notes, then closed her legal pad. I'll take this to the Board of Trustees next month. I can't promise anything, but I'll advocate for it. This university has been getting a lot of attention because of you, Mr. Brooks. Mostly positive, but there's been criticism too, about how we employed you for 4 years without recognizing your abilities, about what that says about how we value our workers. This fellowship could be part of our response to that criticism. A substantive response, not just PR. That's all we're asking, Celeste said. A fair hearing. They left the dean's office with cautious optimism, and Celeste turned to Malik in the hallway. That went better than I expected. She's actually considering it. She's considering how it makes the university look, Malik corrected, but if good policy comes from self-interested motives, I'll take it. Over the next 3 weeks, Malik's life transformed in ways both overwhelming and necessary. Dr. Reyes helped him navigate the process of reinstatement at MIT, not as a current student, but with official recognition of his previous work and credits toward the doctorate he'd never finished. Whitmore offered him a visiting researcher position with a modest salary and full benefits, including healthcare that would cover his mother's treatments. The hedge fund offer turned into a surprisingly thoughtful conversation about applied mathematics research, though Malik ultimately declined in favor of academic work. And through it all, there was the media circus, interviews with journalists who wanted to know his whole story, invitations to speak at universities about non-traditional paths into academia, TED Talk proposals, a literary agent who thought his story would make a great memoir. Malik declined most of it, but he accepted a few carefully chosen opportunities. A profile in a mathematics journal, a panel discussion about access and equity in STEM, an interview with a podcast that focused on education reform. He was learning to control his narrative, to be the person telling his story instead of the subject of other people's stories. His mother's health stabilized with the new insurance coverage, not cured, never cured, but managed well enough that she could breathe easier, had fewer emergency episodes, could enjoy her days instead of just surviving them. Mrs. Patterson gave Malik a small goodbye party on his last night shift with cake from the cafeteria and an awkward speech about how he'd been a good employee and they were sorry to lose him but proud of where he was going. "You'll come back and visit?" she asked, and there were actual tears in her eyes. "Every week," Malik promised. "This building was my home for 4 years. I'm not forgetting that." Sarah Mitchell reached out to collaborate on a paper. She'd been working on a problem related to his dissertation research and thought their approaches could complement each other. James Chen sent regular messages full of graduate student gossip and encouragement. Even some of the students he'd competed against in the Euler Challenge became friendly contacts, the initial rivalry replaced by genuine respect. And Celeste became something unexpected. Not quite a friend, not exactly a mentor, but a colleague in the truest sense. They met twice a week to work on research, and she pushed him hard, questioned his reasoning, made him defend every claim. But she also listened when he pointed out assumptions she was making, and she changed her approach when he showed her a better way. They were working on a paper that would correct and extend her 2017 result, with both their names on it as equal contributors. "You know," she said one afternoon 6 weeks after the competition, "when I made that joke about marrying you if you solved my problem, I was being cruel. Using marriage as a taunt, implying you weren't worth serious consideration as a person." Malik looked up from his calculations. "I remember. Why bring it up now?" "Because I want to apologize for that specifically. It was demeaning to you, to the idea of partnership, to the actual serious work you were doing. And I've been thinking about how we use language to diminish people without even realizing it." She paused, then added with a slight smile, "Though I do find it ironic that we're now working together almost every day. Not married, obviously, but partners in a professional sense. The universe has a sense of humor. Or a sense of justice," Malik said, "forcing you to actually respect someone you tried to humiliate." "Both, probably." Celeste returned to her own work, then spoke again without looking up. "For what it's worth, I do respect you. Not because of the competition or the viral videos or any of that, but because you do good mathematics and you call me on my bullshit. That's valuable." It was the closest she'd come to expressing something like friendship, and Malik accepted it in the spirit it was offered. They went back to work, two mathematicians pursuing truth together, and the afternoon sunlight streamed through the office windows and made the equations on the whiteboard glow like promises. 6 months after the Euler Challenge, on a cold March morning when the first hints of spring were starting to appear in the trees outside, Malik stood in front of a classroom full of undergraduate students and felt a terror more complete than anything he'd experienced during the competition. "Good morning," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. "I'm Malik Brooks, and I'll be your instructor for Introduction to Real Analysis this semester." It was his first teaching assignment, a course for sophomores and juniors who were considering mathematics majors. Celeste had recommended him for the position, and the department had agreed partly because of his notoriety and partly because they genuinely believed he'd be good at it. Malik hoped they were right. "Before we dive into limits and continuity," he continued, "I want to tell you something about how I approach mathematics. A lot of you probably know my story, or you think you do, because you've seen the videos or read the articles. But here's the thing they don't usually include. I'm not special. I'm not a genius who sees things other people can't. I'm just someone who loves mathematics enough to keep doing it even when everything in my life was telling me to give up." He paused, looking at the faces in front of him, some engaged, some skeptical, some already looking at their phones. "This class is going to be hard. Real analysis is where mathematics stops being about calculation and starts being about proof, about rigorous thinking, about building arguments that can withstand any challenge. Some of you will struggle, some of you will want to quit, and I'm telling you now that struggling doesn't mean you don't belong here. It means you're doing the work. Mathematics isn't about being smart enough to understand everything immediately. It's about being stubborn enough to keep working until understanding comes." One student raised her hand, a young woman in the second row with bright green hair. "Is it true you found an error in Dr. Rourke's famous paper during the competition?" Malik smiled. "I did. And you want to know the secret? I wasn't trying to find an error. I was trying to understand the proof, and when I really paid attention to the logic, something didn't make sense. That's all mathematical research is, paying attention to what doesn't make sense and being honest about it, even when the thing that doesn't make sense was written by someone famous. That's pretty badass, another student said, and several others laughed. It's not badass, Malik corrected gently. It's just mathematics. Now, let's talk about the epsilon delta definition of a limit, which is going to seem completely bizarre at first, but will eventually become the most natural thing in the world. He taught for 90 minutes, and it was terrifying and exhilarating and exhausting. He stumbled over explanations, had to backtrack when he realized he'd skipped steps, saw confusion on students' faces, and had to find different ways to make concepts clear. But he also saw moments of understanding, saw students' eyes light up when something clicked, saw them asking questions that showed they were really thinking. When the class ended and the students filed out, Celeste was waiting in the hallway. She'd sat in on the lecture, making notes. "How'd I do?" Malik asked. "You were nervous, which is normal for a first lecture. You rushed through the last 15 minutes. Watch your pacing next time. But you connected with them. They were listening, engaging, even the ones in the back row who usually check out." She handed him her notes. "Overall, you're going to be a good teacher. You just need practice." "That's a relief." "Also," Celeste said with a slight smile, "the mathematics isn't badass line?" That was perfect. They needed to hear that it's not about being special, it's about being willing to do the work. They walked together through the mathematics building, past classrooms where Malik had once cleaned whiteboards and emptied trash cans. Now he was teaching in those rooms, writing his own equations on those boards, helping students find their own paths into mathematics. "The Brooks Fellowship got approved," Celeste said as they reached her office. "The board voted unanimously. It'll launch next fall with funding for 5 fellows initially. We're planning a broad search, reaching out to community colleges, professional networks, social services agencies, anywhere we might find people with mathematical training who've left academia." Malik felt emotion tightening his throat. "That's incredible. It wouldn't have happened without you, without your story making it impossible for them to ignore the problem." She paused at her door. "We're naming the first cohort after you specifically, the Malik Brooks Inaugural Fellows. I hope that's okay. I probably should have asked first." "It's more than okay, it's—" Malik stopped, unable to find words adequate to the moment. "Thank you. For all of this. For changing." "Thank you for making me," Celeste said quietly, "for being impossible to ignore, for calling me on my bullshit, for being willing to work with me even after everything. I'm a better mathematician and a better person because you didn't let me stay comfortable in my assumptions." They shook hands, a gesture that had become their ritual, a formal acknowledgement of partnership and mutual respect. Then Celeste went into her office to work on research, and Malik headed to the library to prepare for his next lecture. But first, he detoured past the custodial offices on the first floor. Mrs. Patterson was at her desk, doing paperwork with the same methodical efficiency she brought to everything. "Hey," Malik said from the doorway. "Just wanted to say hi." She looked up and smiled, a real smile, not her usual professional expression. "Professor Brooks, how's the teaching going?" "I'm not a professor yet, just an instructor. But it's going okay, terrifying, but okay." He leaned against the doorframe. "How are things here?" "Same as always. Buildings get dirty, we clean them. Your replacement is good. Not as thorough as you were on the whiteboards, but he's learning." Mrs. Patterson set down her pen. "You know what I think about when I see you walking these halls in the daytime with students calling you professor and people asking for your help with math?" "What?" "I think about how many other people are out there, working jobs that don't match who they are, and nobody notices. You got noticed because you're brilliant and you got lucky. But there's probably janitors who could be teachers, teachers who could be doctors, doctors who could be artists. All these people stuck in the wrong lives because they made choices out of necessity and never got a chance to unmake them." She smiled sadly. "Your fellowship is going to help some of them. Not all, not nearly all, but some." "Some is better than none," Malik said. "Some is everything," Mrs. Patterson corrected. "To the people it helps." Malik said goodbye and continued to the library, but her words stayed with him. She was right. The Brooks Fellowship would help some people, and his story might inspire others to create similar programs elsewhere. But there would still be thousands, millions of people whose brilliance went unrecognized, whose potential went unrealized, whose stories never got told. He couldn't save everyone. He could barely save himself. But he could do the work in front of him, teach his classes, publish his research, help build systems that were slightly less broken than the ones he'd inherited. And maybe, if he was very lucky, inspire some of his students to carry that work forward. 1 year after the Euler Challenge, Malik stood in the same auditorium where it had all happened and watched 5 people receive certificates welcoming them as the inaugural Brooks Fellows. They ranged in age from 28 to 53. They'd left academia for reasons including caregiving, financial hardship, health crises, and immigration complications. And now they were getting a second chance. The ceremony was small, intentionally, just the fellows, their families, university administration, and a few faculty members. No cameras, no reporters, no fanfare. This wasn't about spectacle. It was about the quiet, difficult work of rebuilding lives and careers. Celeste gave a brief speech about the program's goals and the importance of creating flexible pathways into academia. Dean Hartwell spoke about the university's commitment to access and equity, and then they asked Malik to say a few words. He stood at the podium and looked out at the 5 fellows sitting in the front row, and he saw himself in each of them, the mixture of hope and fear, determination and uncertainty, the knowledge that they were being given something precious and fragile that could still be taken away. "I'm not going to give you an inspirational speech," he said. "You don't need inspiration. You're already here, which means you're already brave enough to try again. What I want to tell you is something simpler. You belong here. Not because you've proven yourself, not because you won a competition or went viral or found an error in someone's famous proof. You belong here because you love mathematics enough to keep choosing it even when everything else fell apart. That's enough. That will always be enough." He paused, feeling emotion tightening his throat again. "This fellowship exists because I got lucky, because I was visible at the right moment, because people listened when I told my story. But it should exist because it's right, because the system we have is broken and needs fixing. So use this opportunity. Do brilliant work. Prove that investing in people with complicated lives isn't charity, it's good sense. And then help us extend this program, expand it, make sure the next group of people doesn't have to get lucky to get a second chance." The applause was warm but not overwhelming. This wasn't that kind of moment. After the ceremony, Malik talked with each of the fellows individually, learned their stories, offered whatever advice and encouragement he could. One of them, a woman named Aisha, who'd left her physics PhD to care for her father and had been working in medical billing for 6 years, grabbed his hand with fierce intensity. "Thank you," she said, tears in her eyes. "You gave me permission to hope again. I didn't realize how much I needed that until I saw your competition, until I saw that someone could come back." Malik squeezed her hand. "You were always coming back. This just made it possible." Later, as the auditorium emptied and the afternoon light slanted through the high windows, Celeste found him standing on the stage where they'd first faced each other as antagonists. "Thinking about that day?" she asked. "Hard not to. Everything changed because of what happened here." Malik looked at her. "Do you ever regret it? The challenge, the competition, all of it?" "I regret how I handled it, but I don't regret that it happened. We both needed it. Me to realize how my assumptions were damaging, you to become visible." She joined him on the stage, both of them looking out at the empty seats. "Though I'd be lying if I said I wasn't terrified the whole time that you'd fail, that I'd be responsible for publicly humiliating someone who didn't deserve it. I almost did fail. That final problem, if I hadn't noticed the error, if I just accepted your published proof as correct, I'd have hit a wall. But you did notice it, because you're actually brilliant, not just talented, and that's the difference that matters." Celeste turned to face him directly. "Speaking of which, I have something to tell you. My paper, our paper, on the corrected proof, it's been accepted by the annals, and the review board specifically noted that your contribution was essential, that the revised proof is more elegant than my original. You're going to be a published mathematician in one of the field's most prestigious journals." Malik felt the news settle over him like a weight and a release simultaneously, published in the Annals of Mathematics. The kind of achievement that defined careers, that opened doors, that meant you'd contributed something permanent to the field. We did that together, he said. We did, Celeste agreed, which is exactly how mathematics is supposed to work. Collaboration, mutual challenge, building on each other's insights. She smiled. Remember when I made that stupid joke about marrying you if you solved my problem? Hard to forget. I've been thinking about it. About how I used marriage as a taunt, as a way to suggest you weren't worth serious consideration. And I want to take it back. Not the apology, that stands. But I want to replace it with something better. She took a breath. Malik Brooks, would you consider being my friend? The question was so earnest, so vulnerable, that Malik felt something shift in his chest. They'd been colleagues for a year, collaborators, cautious allies in building something better than what they'd started with. But friendship was different. Friendship required trust beyond professional respect. I'll consider it, Malik said slowly. But friends call each other on their bullshit, remember? You set that as a condition. I did, and I stand by it. Then yeah, I'll be your friend on one condition. You have dinner with me and my mom. She wants to meet this woman who tried to destroy her son and then helped put him back together. Celeste laughed, and it was genuine and unguarded. I'd be honored, though I'm terrified of meeting her. You should be. She's way scarier than any mathematics competition. They left the auditorium together, two mathematicians who'd found their way from antagonism through respect to something that might eventually become real friendship. The future stretched out ahead of them, papers to publish, students to teach, fellows to mentor, systems to slowly, persistently change. Malik's phone buzzed. His mother. How did the ceremony go? He texted back. Perfect. 5 people get their second chance. Her response came immediately, just like you got yours. I'm so proud of who you've become. Malik looked at those words for a long moment, then typed, I'm still becoming. But I'm proud of who I'm becoming too. That night, alone in his apartment with his mathematics books and his notebooks and the Euler Challenge trophy gathering dust on his shelf, Malik opened his dissertation research and started writing. Not to prove anything, not to become famous, not to change the world. Just to do mathematics, to follow questions wherever they led, to find beauty in abstract structures, to contribute one small piece to humanity's understanding of truth. It was enough. It had always been enough. And in the morning, he'd wake up and teach his students and meet with Celeste and work with the Brooks Fellows and continue building a life that matched who he actually was instead of who circumstances had forced him to become. The janitor's uniform hung in his closet, cleaned and pressed, kept not out of shame, but as a reminder of where he'd been, what he'd survived, how far he'd traveled to reclaim himself. He'd never wear it again, but he'd never forget what it felt like to be invisible either. Because that invisibility had taught him something essential, that worth didn't come from being seen, but from knowing yourself clearly enough that being unseen couldn't erase you. Malik Brooks had been a mathematician when he was mopping floors, and he'd still be a mathematician if he lost everything tomorrow. The work was the thing. The mathematics was the thing. Everything else was just noise. He closed his notebook, turned off the light, and let himself rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new problems to solve, new students to teach, new opportunities to prove that brilliance could survive anything, even being overlooked by a world that wasn't designed to see it. The story wasn't over. Stories like his never really ended. They just opened doors for other stories to begin. And maybe that was the point. Not to be the hero who solved everything, but to be the person who made it possible for others to solve their own problems, claim their own space, tell their own truths. Malik Brooks, mathematician. Not because he'd won a competition or found an error or gone viral, but because he'd never stopped doing mathematics, even when no one was watching. That was the real victory, and it was enough.